Chapter 1235. There's something wrong with the light of extreme darkness. Another 8 days passed by outside the light of extreme darkness. Bai Feng stood there with an aloof look in her eyes, but she was frowning. She felt that the light of extreme darkness had appeared too suddenly, and there was even something bizarre about it. Bai Feng was not the only one who was uncertain about this. It could be said that many cultivators were uncertain about it, but this was indeed the light of extreme darkness. Because of that, no matter how much they hesitated, they were just hesitating. There was nothing intricate about Su Ming's plan. In fact, it could be said that it was full of loopholes, but Su Ming did not care about it. As long as this was truly the origin of the light of extreme darkness, it was enough. Just this point alone was enough. This could be considered an overt scheme, but in truth, it could not even be considered strategy. It was just a game in which Su Ming used himself as bait. Over the past few days, he had watched countless cultivators come to investigate the light of extreme darkness that belonged to him. Su Ming was not in a hurry. He had been waiting for someone who had the right to obtain the origin of the light of extreme darkness. In Su Ming's eyes, there were only 3 people in the Immortals Union who had the right to obtain it. One of them was naturally the aloof Bai Feng, the second was Di Tian, and the third was one of the 8 paramount Daos, the Black-Robed Man. Di Tian planned to change his life, and Bai Feng needed to ascend to immortality. Both of them had their own needs, and because of that, only the Black-Robed Man was left. This was in line with Su Ming's previous analysis. He had originally been waiting for the Black-Robed Man, and what made Su Ming certain was that he had learned from the soul thread that another powerful warrior would soon descend in Saint Defire's camp. A powerful warrior who had the same status as the Black-Robed Man would naturally fight over him. That was why Su Ming had been certain that as long as the Black-Robed Man was tempted, he would definitely obtain the origin of the light of extreme darkness before his companions descended. Time passed, and the war between Morning Dao sect and the Immortals Union reached its climax. Every single day, intense battles would break out in various parts of the true world. The number of casualties reached a terrifying degree, but even so, the war did not end. It continued on with even greater intensity. Several more days passed. When there was less than a month left before the other Almighty from Saint Defire's camp descended, a large number of immortals surrounded the light of extreme darkness that was Su Ming. They had also investigated most of it and found a pattern, along with a path that led to the core of the light of extreme darkness. Su Ming did not guide them. The only thing he did was to turn himself into the light of extreme darkness. As for the other matters, he felt that if he interfered too much with them, he would seem too fake. On that day, the Black-Robed Man appeared beyond the origin of the light of extreme darkness again. Clearly, he had already made preparations. At that moment, his eyes, which were hidden under the black robe, shone brilliantly, and a vast power spread out from his body. It was equivalent to the power of those in Life Realm, but it was not something that those in Life Realm from arid Triad Expanse Cosmos could hope to win against. There was an incredibly great disparity between them. Arcane Void of the 3rd step in Saint Defire's camp's cultivation system. Su Ming sensed the presence of the Black-Robed Man's cultivation base, and his obscure divine sense rippled slowly. Dao Kong's body has already been destroyed, but as long as my nascent divinity is around, all of my bodies can spread out the presence of Dao Kong's soul. It's the same for my Kang body. I can also do the same for my clone that practices the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. But this Black-Robed Man, perhaps he is suitable to become my other clone, a body that can allow me to obtain the status of a member of Saint Defire's camp. Based on my original plan, I don't need to possess him, but by the looks of it now, perhaps possessing him will make the process of retrieving my physical body smoother. But the difficulty of this is too great. This person is, after all, an almighty in Arcane Void. In silence, Su Ming slowly forced down the thought that had suddenly sprouted in his mind. He could not allow any accidents to happen to the matter of him seizing his physical body back. In silence, Su Ming temporarily gave up on this thought. Almost at the instant the ripples of Su Ming's divine sense disappeared, the black-robed man who had reached arcane void realm slowly lifted his foot. Under the respectful gazes of countless immortals in the area, he walked towards the origin of the extreme darkness. Bai Feng was by his side. She formed a seal with her right hand and pointed at the air. The sky immediately distorted, and huge eyeballs appeared. There were thousands of them, and they surrounded the area. Dark light shone in each of them as they stared at the origin of the extreme darkness. The black-robed man's footsteps came to a halt. He turned his head around and cast a glance at Bai Feng. She bent her body slightly and lowered her head to bow to him. Not bad. The black-robed man laughed hoarsely, and praise appeared in his eyes. Bai Feng's actions might not be very meaningful, but her intentions could still be seen. This made the black-robed man very satisfied, especially since Bai Feng had always been beautiful. Her cold demeanor often made the black-robed man's heart itch. When you reach St. Defire, you can follow me. Bai Feng's face might still be cold, but there was a hint of a smile on it. There was a hint of pleasant surprise and a slight hint of bashfulness on her face, and it immediately made the black-robed man admire her even more. The white-robed and white-haired Di Tian looked as calm as ever at that moment. He did not need to use his actions to prove anything. He might desire to become an abyss builder, but he knew that St. Defire's camp desired to control an abyss builder even more than he did. And Di Tian was, without a doubt, the best choice. He was confident that no one could surpass him in this aspect, not even the Emperor of Abyss True World, because he was the one who thought of this plan and had been preparing for it for countless years. In fact, even if he did not need St. Defire's help, he would still have a 3/10 chance of succeeding. The help from those from St. Defire only increased his chances. A brilliant light shone in Di Tian's eyes. Su Xian, you and I have fought against each other our entire lives. This time, I will stand before you as an abyss builder, and I will possess you. Between us, I will definitely win in the end. Di Tian's heart stirred slightly. He had longed for this day for far too long. Under the countless cultivators' gazes, the black-robed man, one of the 8 paramount Daos, took a step forward and stepped into the light of extreme darkness. At the same time, the powerful warriors from the other immortal sects guarded the area with wary expressions. They had been given a death order to prevent anything from happening in the area. Fortunately, this was the core of the Immortals' Union. It was the doorstep of the immortal sects, which was why it would not be easy for the people from Morning Dao sect to come here. The possibility of them launching a large-scale invasion was next to none. Only a few powerful warriors might be able to step in space, but Di Tian had already made perfect preparations. As the black-robed man stepped into the origin of the light of extreme darkness, and the cultivators in the periphery became wary, time trickled by. Soon, the time taken for an incense stick to burn went by. The black-robed man floated in the light of extreme darkness. He did not move quickly, and every single time he traveled a certain distance, he would stop for a moment to think before changing his direction. Endless light of extreme darkness shot through the area around him. As the black-robed man moved forward, the light became stronger. But the more it was so, the more certain the black-robed man was that the light did not have any form of consciousness. When an hour later, the black-robed man had already traveled nearly half the distance. His speed became slower, and a large amount of chilling air spread out from his body. The light of extreme darkness around him turned black, as if it was a huge mouth that wanted to devour him. Wariness appeared in his eyes. Occasionally, he would take a few steps back and lift his right hand as if he was calculating something. Just like that, when 2 hours passed, he had traveled nearly 7/10 of the distance. Yet at that moment, the light of extreme darkness swiftly grew several times stronger, but the black-robed man seemed to have known that this would happen. He sat down cross-legged a step ahead, formed a seal with his hands, and immediately brought out a small cauldron. When he pressed his hand against it, he exhaled a breath of origin life chi. The cauldron shone with green light and surrounded his body. Its surface was as smooth as a mirror, and it continuously reflected the incoming light of extreme darkness, as if it had indirectly turned him into a source of light. As expected, it will only be weakened for 2 hours. A smile appeared at the corners of the black-robed man's lips. When he closed his eyes, he seemed to have cast aside all resistance and immersed himself in controlling the cauldron. A day passed. When the light of extreme darkness became weak on the second day, the black-robed man immediately opened his eyes. Once he put away the cauldron, he moved forward again. This time, since he was moving slower, he used 2 hours to reach the core of the light of extreme darkness. While he was not too far away, there was still some distance between him and the core of the light of extreme darkness. When the light of extreme darkness became stronger again, he sat down cross-legged and used the cauldron's green light to fight against it. He still had his eyes closed, as if he was incredibly at ease with this place. He did not try to guard against any unexpected actions. The third day, the fourth day, when the light of extreme darkness became weak on the fifth day, the black-robed man moved and appeared at the core of the origin of the light of extreme darkness. This was a pitch-black world, but one could faintly see an extremely perfect and complicated rune in the darkness not far away. It was faintly discernible in the darkness, making it difficult for one to remember it no matter how many times one looked at it. This is the core of the origin of the light of extreme darkness. A glint appeared in the black-robed man's eyes, and excitement appeared in them. At the instant the 2 hours of weakness were about to end, he spread his divine sense outwards and swept past the runic symbol. He did not sense any form of consciousness there, but it was as if he did not have enough time to brand it with his divine sense. As the time of weakness passed, a vast power erupted from the runic symbol, causing the black-robed man to immediately sit down cross-legged and use the cauldron to protect himself. He closed his eyes as well, and besides the green light surrounding his body, he did not do anything else to protect himself. When the 2 hours of weakness arrived on the sixth day, the black-robed man charged towards the runic symbol. At the instant he approached it, his body crumbled with a bang. His flesh and blood spilled everywhere, and all of them landed on the runic symbol. At the same time, the expression of the black-robed man's soul was ferocious. With disbelief, he swiftly retreated, and a piercing roar tumbled out of his mouth. "This is a trap. You have a mind of your own." This bizarre scene immediately stunned Su Ming, who had been observing the black-robed man all this while because he had not done anything at all. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1236. At the same time, the black-robed man's soul continued weakening under the light of extreme darkness. As he fled, his piercing voice echoed in the air, as if he wanted to tell everything to the people outside. Su Ming's divine sense remained the same. Not a single change could be detected. He only stared at the black-robed man's soul coldly as he put on an act. After a dozen-something breaths, the black-robed man's soul had already fled tens of thousands of feet away. His footsteps came to an abrupt halt. When he turned his head around, the panic and terror on his face disappeared, replaced by a faint smile. With a single move, he returned to the place where the runic symbol was. Once he observed it carefully, he rushed forward, causing his soul to touch the runic symbol. With a bang, his soul turned into countless threads that entangled the runic symbol. At the same time, Su Ming noticed another black-robed man rushing towards him from the light of extreme darkness. What a cautious black-robed man. He didn't use his real body to come in contact with the runic symbol. Instead, he had his subordinates come forward to collect it indirectly. He's also continuously testing me. Su Ming observed the runic symbol after he turned into the origin of the light of extreme darkness. He noticed that the soul threads were continuously fusing into it as they entangled it. After a moment, when the second black-robed man arrived, his body also crumbled with a bang. His flesh and blood were stained by the runic symbol, and his soul also turned into countless soul threads that entangled the runic symbol even faster. When the third, fourth, Fifth, the 7 black-robed men in Su Ming's light of extreme darkness self-destructed beside the runic symbol. Their flesh and blood had already dyed the runic symbol blood red. Their souls had already enveloped the runic symbol, and a monstrous blood-red light shone from the scattered flesh and blood around the runic symbol. At the instant the blood-red light shone, it seemed to form a rune. It flickered a few times, and another black-robed man walked out from within. That black-robed man was an arcane void realm. He was the black-robed old man from the 8 paramount Daos in St. Defire's camp whom Su Ming had observed in the world outside. It was just as Su Ming had deduced. Everything before was just a test. The black-robed old man had lived for many years, so there was no way he would act recklessly. Even if he was incredibly tempted and certain in his heart, he was still incredibly cautious. However, even though it was a test, it was also a method for him to take away the origin of the light of extreme darkness. He did not want to fuse the light of extreme darkness into his body, as the people in the outside world thought. Instead, he wanted to refine it into his own enchanted treasure. His 7 subordinates had long since been implanted with a split soul. Their flesh and blood were used to activate the teleportation, and their souls were used to wrap around the runes. Because these souls were originally his split soul, the black-robed old man could indirectly refine them without touching the runes. It doesn't matter if you have consciousness or not. I'll treat you as if you do. The black-robed old man in front of the runic symbol spoke in a hoarse voice. He lifted his hands and pointed at the runic symbol. Immediately, all the black threads on it tightened. As banging sounds echoed in the air, all the black threads shattered and turned into black smoke that seeped into the runic symbol. The black-robed old man swung his arm and immediately sat down cross-legged. He continued forming seals with his hands, and marks appeared out of thin air to brand the runic symbol surrounded by black smoke. Besides Su Ming's consciousness, the bald crane was also in the runic symbol. At that moment, the bald crane was trembling and releasing its inborn ability in a frenzy. It was not trying to fight against the black-robed old man's brand, but was activating the method it had prepared previously to make the runic symbol undergo some sort of change. This was the decision Su Ming had made after his discussion with the bald crane. If the complete runic symbol was said to contain 100 parts, then what Su Ming needed the bald crane to do was to hide 70 of them. This was impossible, but the difficulty lay in making the remaining 30 parts feel as if they were also 100. Because of it, Su Ming, who had occupied most of the bald crane's consciousness, could wipe off the other person at any time, and his plan would be completed. Darn all! How dare this brat try to play tricks on me? Little boy Su, give me some stimulation. I need stimulation. The bald crane shuddered and roared in Su Ming's soul. At that moment, the black-robed old man's speed of forming seals became faster, and more brands appeared. Traces of connections were swiftly being established. 2 crystals, Su Ming said calmly. The bald crane let out a prideful cry, and its spirits were instantly lifted. Su Ming had always believed that the bald crane had no concept of numbers. No matter how many there were, as long as the number was greater than 1, it would be stimulation to the bald crane. At the same time, the black-robed old man outside the runic symbol bit the tip of his tongue and coughed up a mouthful of blood. At the instant it landed on the runic symbol, it let out a bang, and the connection was completely established. 20 crystals, Su Ming said flatly. The bald crane's excitement had already reached its peak. At the instant the black-robed old man's blood coughed up and the connection was established, the bald crane finally completed its previous preparations and activation, causing 7/10 of the runic symbol to be hidden away, even though it did not seem to have changed. In just the span of dozens of breaths, the black-robed old man's brand completely occupied the runic symbol. Excitement appeared on his face, and he threw his head back and laughed long and hard at the sky. He could sense that there was an inseparable connection between the origin of the extreme darkness and him. With just one thought, he could make it change into a myriad of forms, as if it was a part of his body. This feeling made him understand that his blood refinement had succeeded. It did not matter whether the origin of the extreme darkness had been sentient before. At that moment, its only consciousness was his soul. As he laughed long and hard, the black-robed old man lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the runic symbol. Immediately, the runic symbol hiding Su Ming's nascent divinity shrank. The light of extreme darkness around him also shrank swiftly. In an instant, the light of extreme darkness disappeared, and the runic symbol landed in the black-robed old man's withered hand. With a squeeze, the runic symbol disappeared and entered his body. It floated in his mind and was contained by his nascent divinity. The feeling that he had gained control over the light of extreme darkness instantly made the black-robed old man's aura seem to have become slightly stronger. When the light of extreme darkness disappeared, everything in the area was instantly revealed to the numerous cultivators outside. They saw the black-robed old man laughing long and hard, and when he turned around, a piercing black light suddenly spread out from his body. When the black light spread out, countless shrill screams of pain came from the area. The hundreds of thousands of cultivators who had been guarding the area cautiously fell backwards while screaming. They coughed up blood, and their souls were severely injured. Their bodies instantly turned into ice, and blood flowed out of their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. In fact, there were thousands of cultivators whose souls shattered, and their bodies turned into ice blocks that fell from the galaxy. The black-robed old man's laughter became even louder. He did not care whether the barbarian cultivators around him died or were injured. They were just ants, and they were not worthy of his attention. At that moment, he was incredibly pleased with himself, and he was very satisfied with the power of the light of extreme darkness. Based on his analysis, if he spread out the light of extreme darkness at full power and pushed it forward with his cultivation base, he could instantly kill hundreds of thousands of people in the area. This sort of supreme treasure was rare, even in Saint Defire's camp. With his status, it was impossible for him to obtain it, but in arid triad expanse cosmos, he could easily obtain it, so there was no way he would not be excited. The souls of the hundreds of thousands of people in the area were heavily injured, but Tion was not bothered by it. He wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed to the black-robed old man. Fellow Taoist Palm Extreme Paragon, congratulations on obtaining this supreme treasure. A bright light appeared in Bai Feng's eyes. A hint of a smile appeared on her aloof face, and she bowed slightly to the black-robed old man. Don't worry, I will fulfill all the promises I made previously. The black-robed old man's laughter echoed in the air. Just as he was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed, and he lifted his head. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes. He actually came early. Looks like the ancient god does indeed have a way to send messages into Saint Defire. The black-robed old man's eyes focused, and a cold sneer appeared on his lips. Soon after, Tion's expression changed as well. When he turned his head around, excitement appeared in his eyes, and he looked at the pillar of light that shot into the sky in the immortals' territory. The pillar of light shone at that moment, and in just the span of a few breaths, it shone with a light that reached 100,000 feet. As it surged into the sky, all the cultivators in the area could see it clearly. Xingji Dao's clone has arrived early. Fellow Taoist Tion, your serendipity has arrived. Oh well, I won't make you wait any longer. Go to the Abyss Builder's physical body and bring it over. When Xingji Dao arrives, we will work together. The black-robed old man swung his arm, stepped into the air, and charged towards the spot where the pillar of light was. Tion could not hide the excitement on his face. Without any hesitation, he stepped into the immortals' territory and charged towards the spot where Su Ming's physical body was. Bai Feng's expression turned cold again. She cast a glance at the hundreds of thousands of cultivators around her, and derision appeared in her eyes, as if she was looking at ants. She turned around and hesitated for a moment before heading towards the pillar of light. The pillar of light that connected Saint Defire Expanse Cosmos to true morning Tao world shone with a piercing light. There was also a powerful, mighty pressure spreading out with a bang. There were countless runic symbols surrounding the pillar of light, and each of them contained a pressure that could suffocate a person. Booming sounds spread through the entire Immortals Union. As they spread out, they traveled to every single battlefield until they affected all of True Morning Dao World. It caused all the cultivators in True Morning Dao World to feel a mighty pressure that made them feel as if a mountain was pressing down on them. They also felt as if their hearts were trembling and their souls were being torn apart. Booming sounds reverberated in the air and reached Morning Dao Sect. Almost at the instant the pillar of light reverberated in the air and the cultivators from Saint Defire's camp descended, Su Xian Yi, who was sitting and meditating in the isolation grounds of Morning Dao Sect, opened his eyes. A strong hint of expectation appeared in them, as if he had been suppressing it for countless years, and at that moment, it was finally about to erupt. The first stage of my plan is about to be completed. True Morning Dao World is no longer useful. I prepared for it for so many years. Lord Sublime Paragon, don't disappoint me. Fellow Taoist from Saint Defire's camp, you must also work hard. As for Su Ming, Su Xian, he fell silent. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he frowned. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1237. Where did the child go? I can't find him. This is something that has never happened before. The seed of life extermination is about to mature, but it seems to be disrupted by a wave of power. But as long as it doesn't affect the first stage of the plan, it'll be fine. There are certain things that he cannot know about before the seed of life extermination matures. A complicated look appeared on Su Xianyi's face. He sighed softly, and a hint of guilt shone in his eyes. He lowered his head to look at the rattle drum in front of him, then lifted his hand to stroke it gently. I've let you down, but you are indeed not suitable for Yu Xian, because you don't have the right. I will use other methods to make it up to you. Su Xian, he closed his eyes. When he did so, in a palace located in an unknown location in the Emperor of Abyss True World was a pink lady's room. The place was filled with a strange fragrance of flowers. That fragrance was definitely extraordinary. With just one whiff of it, a person's cultivation base would increase slightly, and even their soul would be nourished. If a person could train in a room all year round, then their cultivation speed would be several times faster compared to the outside world. This sort of place was rare in all of Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, but there was one in the Emperor of Abyss True World. Yu Xian sat quietly in the room and stared at the starry sky outside the window in a daze. There was a tray placed on the table in front of her. There were two items on it. One of them was a rattle drum, a toy she had played with during her childhood. There were originally two of them, but the other one was lost. There was another item on the tray. It was a black fragment. If Su Ming was there, he would definitely be able to tell at first glance that this fragment was the same as the one he had obtained from Xiao Hong in the past. It was a fragment of the seed of life extermination. In True Morning Dao World, the cultivators of the Immortals Union and Morning Dao Sect were engaged in intense battles in multiple places. The hearts of both sides trembled amidst the booming sounds, but there were practically no one who knew the reason behind it. They did not know that a disaster was about to descend on True Morning Dao World. They also did not know that at that moment, in the core of the Immortals Union, the Pillar of Light had become incredibly dazzling. Outside the Pillar of Light, the black-robed old man stood with his hands behind his back. Beside him, Bai Feng stared at the Pillar of Light with a look of longing. She wanted to ascend as an immortal. This was her dream. For this, she was willing to give up everything. On the other side, Di Tian had returned as well. His expression was one of excitement. He had been waiting for this day for far, far too long. Now that the results were about to be revealed, even though he had once been a sublime venerable one, he still could not control his emotions. Time passed slowly. The rumbling continued for the time it takes 2 incense sticks to burn and grew more and more intense. Suddenly, an afterimage appeared within the pillar of light, shooting through the pillar of light at a speed visible to the naked eye as it shot downward. Through the pillar of light, one could faintly see that the afterimage seemed to be that of a person. At this moment, it was constantly twisting and changing, as if it was shuttling through another world. Waves of vast, mighty pressure spread out from the afterimage. It shot through the pillar of light and spread outwards. In fact, the space around it started showing signs of shattering under the mighty pressure. A power that seemed to contain the ability to change dimensions spread out with loud bangs. Detion's pupils shrank. He stood there without moving, but his hair and robes fluttered because of the wind. Baifeng's face turned pale. She gradually moved back, as if she was enduring the power spreading out. What a powerful level of cultivation! Baifeng sucked in a sharp breath. The black-robed old man's expression remained the same. He stood with his hands behind his back and a cold sneer on his lips. This isn't his level of cultivation. This is the power of the world that appears when he moves between two worlds. This is just a hint of it. All those who have just descended will have some of this power of the world. Once they walk out of the pillar of light, this power of the world will disappear. But his true level of cultivation is even greater than what you can sense right now. It's a pity that there is still a flaw in the pillar of light that leads to the heavens in arid triad expanse cosmos. Or else it would be great if all of us could descend with our real bodies instead of using our souls to reconstruct them. Xing Ji Dao, his level of cultivation is about the same as mine. He is skilled in the power of stars, and his transformations are unpredictable. When the black-robed old man said those words, he cast a glance at the afterimage that was swiftly gathering together in the pillar of light, and he suddenly smiled. Xing Ji Dao, it's been a long time since we last met. At the instant the black-robed old man spoke, two rays of dark light shone at the head of the distorted afterimage in the pillar of light. It looked as if it had opened its eyes, and a fierce glare shone in them as it stared at the black-robed old man. Zhang Ji Dao, it has only been 1,000-something years since we last met. How can you say that it has been a long time? The voice was not as hoarse as the black-robed old man's. Instead, there was a feminine tone to it. When spoke slowly, Bai Feng's heart trembled, and she took a few steps back again. Only Ditian remained standing and looked at the pillar of light. You must be fellow Taoist, Ditian, right? The afterimage in the pillar of light became even more distorted, but even so, it gave off a feeling that it was becoming more corporeal. The gaze moved away from the black-robed old man and stared at Ditian. Indeed, I am, Ditian said with a smile. At that moment, the afterimage in the pillar of light distorted for a moment, and a head with long hair appeared in the pillar of light. It was an incredibly handsome middle-aged man. His expression was awe-inspiring without being angry, and his eyes seemed to contain the galaxy itself. As countless stars intersected with each other, they formed runic symbols that kept changing. When the black-robed old man stared at the afterimage in the pillar of light, Su Ming was also paying attention to it. He stared at the head, and it proved that the figure he had seen through the black-robed man previously was indeed this person. However, when Su Ming sent his divine sense into the pillar of light, he found that the disparity between this person's level of cultivation and the one he saw in the black-robed man's eyes was too great. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. However, when Su Ming remembered the black-robed old man's words, he smiled coldly. By the looks of it, the people from St. Defire can't maintain their complete bodies when they descend. They need to reconstruct their bodies, but once they're reconstructed, they'll be like clones, and a large portion of their power will drop. However, they should be able to slowly recover after some time. As the head appeared in the pillar of light, a body gradually appeared. That body was not clothed, and it was completely naked. It seemed to be growing rapidly, and gradually it was complete. It was a perfect body that could tempt a woman's heart. Baifeng stared at it without blinking. A hint of red had appeared on her icy face, and no one knew whether it was intentional or not, but made her look even more beautiful. Beautiful fellow Taoist, Could you be Phoenix Sex by Phone? The man whose body had already appeared in the pillar of light and whose arms were rapidly growing looked at Bai Feng with a smile. Greetings, Senior Xing Ji Dao. Bai Feng immediately lowered her head and bowed slightly. At the same time she bowed, Xing Ji Dao's limbs manifested perfectly in the pillar of light. With one move, a long blue robe appeared on his body. His broad shoulders and slender body made him look incredibly attractive to the opposite sex. The middle-aged man took a step forward and walked out of the pillar of light. At the instant he did so, the mighty pressure in the area disappeared. It was just as the black-robed old man had said. The mighty pressure came from the power of the world. At that moment, as the power of the world disappeared, a power equivalent to those in Life Realm and belonging to those in Arcane Void Realm in Saint Defire spread out from the middle-aged man's body to fight against the black-robed old man in a subtle manner. The black-robed old man smiled, and black light naturally shone on his body. That black light was the light of extreme darkness. It might have only appeared for an instant, but it immediately caused Xing Ji Dao's pupils to shrink. Looks like I'm still a step too late. You've already taken away the origin of the light of extreme darkness, but it seems like it still needs to be nourished. Xing Ji Dao shook his head. He did not hide the regret in his heart, and as he spoke, a fierce glare appeared in his eyes. Everything in Arid Triad's primeval world is growing. Treasures born together will always appear, the black-robed old man said faintly. Then next time, a glint appeared in Xing Ji Dao's eyes, and he looked at the black-robed old man. I'll give it to you. The black-robed old man smiled faintly. A smile also appeared on Xing Ji Dao's face. His smile grew wider, and in the end, he started laughing along with the black-robed old man. I've finally left Saint Defire Expanse Cosmos. I like this place. There's no pressure here, and I can plunder everything here. Xing Ji Dao looked around him, and there was a very sentimental expression on his face. When he lifted his right hand, he seized Bai Feng. Her expression changed, but she could not fight back at all. Once Xing Ji Dao seized her, he took a deep sniff of her body. The women of the barbarians are very suitable as furnaces, but don't be afraid. I won't turn you into one. You are his, and your master is mine. Xing Ji Dao cast a glance at the black-robed old man, whose expression remained the same. He smiled faintly and let go of Bai Feng's hand. With a pale face, Bai Feng swiftly took a few steps back. When she instinctively stood beside the black-robed old man, a glint appeared in Xing Ji Dao's eyes, and he looked at Di Tian. Fellow Taoist, Di Tian, I descended here with the will of Saint Defire's decree. I will do everything I can to help you change your life and become an abyss builder. Hurry up and place that physical body in Saint Defire's heaven-penetrating pillar. A brilliant light shone in Di Tian's eyes. When he lifted his right hand, he swung his arm, and a huge altar appeared with a bang. Lying on it was Su Ming's real physical body. At the instant the altar appeared, it charged towards the pillar of light and fused with it. It floated in the pillar and was surrounded by countless rays of light. Su Ming was hidden in the runic symbol. Even though it was in the black-robed old man's body, it did not affect Su Ming's ability to see the world around him. He saw Bai Feng, but there was no longer any pain in his heart. There was only indifference. The woman no longer had any connection with him. She had chosen her own path. Following the strong was a choice made by the weak. There was no right or wrong in it. Su Ming also saw his real, physical body on the altar that had fused with the pillar of light. This was the first time Su Ming had gotten so close to his physical body. I brought a treasure that Lord Saint Defire specially created for you to change your life. This treasure can increase your chances of success by 0.2%. With me and Zhang Jidao, we can increase your chances of success by another 0.5. As for the chances of success, you can calculate it yourself, but you must be prepared. There is a possibility that you will fail. If you fail, this treasure will allow your soul to not be destroyed, but it will also mean that you will lose the right to change your life. We will search for other people to continue trying. Xing Jidao's expression was stern as he looked at Di Tian. Di Tian nodded. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he cast his gaze on the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man let out a fake cough. With my light of extreme darkness suppressing your soul, you can increase your chances by 2/10. Nearly 8/10. I have nearly 8/10 of a chance to successfully change my life. Even if their words are slightly exaggerated, minus 2/10, there's still nearly 6/10 of a chance. It's enough. A brilliant light shone in Di Tian's eyes. Hear my orders. Fuse with your soul into your body. Change the heavens. Change your life, and go against the heavens. Summon Saint Difire's treasure. Xing Jidao roared. When he lifted his right hand, he pointed at the pillar of light. Immediately, a white ring flew out from his finger and charged towards the pillar of light. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1238. The white ring was very thin, and it did not look like it belonged to a man. Instead, it looked like it belonged to a woman. When it flew out, it shot through the pillar of light and floated above Su Ming's real physical body on the altar in the pillar of light. Saint Difire's treasure, please. Dark light shone in the eyes of the blue-robed Xing Jidao. He formed a seal with his right hand and pointed at the ring through the pillar of light. The ring immediately shone with a dazzling light and grew larger. In the blink of an eye, it became nearly 30 feet big. At the same time, as it grew larger, waves of aura that caused the pillar of light to tremble were released from the ring. That aura filled the entire pillar of light and seeped out faintly. It instantly caused Bai Feng's expression to change drastically, and she staggered a few steps back. Her face was pale, and an expression of unprecedented shock appeared on her face. There was also a hint of fanaticism shining in her eyes. She shuddered and immediately knelt down. Di Tian was once a sublime paragon. He was a powerful warrior who surpassed the black-robed man and Xing Jidao, who had their bodies reconstructed. Even though he could not compare to the black-robed man and Xing Jidao's real bodies in Saint Difire's camp, he was still someone who could fight against them. When he fought against Su Xian Yi in the past, both of them had been injured, and his injuries were even worse, causing his cultivation base to fall by a large margin. However, no matter what, he was once a sublime paragon. Even so, under the mighty pressure spreading out from the ring, his expression changed, and he took a few steps back. Shock also appeared in his eyes. This pressure gave off a sense of supremacy. It was as if under this pressure, one had to kneel and bow their heads. Any life that dared to struggle under this pressure would definitely be destroyed. Avicania. This is definitely the presence of those in Avicania realm. A powerful warrior in Avicania realm from Saint Difire expands cosmos. Di Tian's breathing quickened. When he moved back, his expression changed, and he chose to kneel down. The white ring in the pillar of light continued, exuding a mighty pressure. There were also a large amount of complicated runic symbols circling around it. Each of those runic symbols contained a power that made Su Ming suffocate, and when he saw them, he felt as if a door had been opened in his life. That door opened his horizons. During that instant, he saw those in Avicania realm. That presence was so strong that Su Ming searched through all his memories, and a figure swiftly appeared in his mind. It was an ancient figure who sat on an ancient ship and watched all the lives bring their offerings to it. Old Man Extermination. This is the presence of someone who is in the same realm as Old Man Extermination. This ring is from Saint Difire. It's Saint Difire's treasure. A fanatical look appeared on Xing Jidao's face, and he immediately knelt down before the ring. The black-robed old man also waved his sleeve and knelt down when he saw the pressure coming from the ring. As the aura continued to spread, all the cultivators who sensed it felt their hearts trembled, and they all knelt down. Slowly, all the cultivators in the Immortals Union, and even the fighting cultivators from Morning Dao sect sensed the aura, and just like the people from the Immortals Union, their hearts trembled. They looked in the direction of the immortals' union in shock, and their bodies instinctively chose to kneel down. The aura continued spreading out. After about a dozen-something breaths, it spread through all of true Morning Dao world. In fact, it even affected Morning Dao sect, causing countless cultivators to be shocked. Their bodies trembled, and with humiliation and despair, they were forced to kneel down in the direction of the immortals' union. The entire Morning Dao sect was in dead silence. The only thing that could be heard was the countless cultivators kneeling down. Only Su Xian Yi, who was originally sitting cross-legged in the isolation grounds of Morning Dao sect, threw his head back and let out a low roar when he sensed the aura. The light he had been looking forward to for a long time appeared on his face. He slowly stood up as the aura spread out, lifted his right hand, and slowly clenched his fist before he threw a punch at the air. There was no sound, but the place where Su Xian Yi was in shuddered violently, as if it was about to collapse. However, countless runic symbols immediately appeared in the air, and they shone rapidly as if they were repairing the place. This aura is still not enough, but the first stage is about to reach completion. When it reaches completion, I, Su Xian Yi, will be able to completely control this body, and I will have the chance to walk out of this place. Saint Defire, Dark Dawn, and Sublime Paragon, you've been making guesses for a long time, but you definitely won't be able to guess my plan. You won't be able to guess the madness I will bring after my race is destroyed. Su Xian Yi threw his head back and laughed loudly. A ferocious look appeared on his face, and within it was a madness that could destroy the universe. Su Xian Yi's roars echoed in the isolation grounds, but they could not reach the immortals' union, and neither could they reach Su Ming's ears. At that moment, Su Ming was in the black-robed old man's body. He stared at the white ring in the pillar of light, and a feeling he had never felt before rose in his heart. It echoed intensely in his heart, making him feel as if his heart was going through a metamorphosis. It was a metamorphosis that would make his level of cultivation even stronger and make him yearn to become the strongest in the universe. Is this Saint Defire's level of cultivation? I wonder if I, Su Ming, will ever possess this level of cultivation in my life. Su Ming stared at the white ring. His divine sense rippled, but he did not notice that the bald crane hiding in the black-robed man's body with him shuddered continuously when it saw the white ring. Longing appeared in its eyes, along with an indescribable feeling. It looked as if it was reminiscing, but also as if it was thinking about something. Fei Hua, how many years has it been? How many years has it been since I left that place? So you have already taken that step and become Saint Defire. Saint Defire, did you use the method I told you in the past? It's a path I used all my life to derive. It's a wrong path, but it's the path I took to become Saint Defire. As the bald crane mumbled, it suddenly used its claw to seize its head. Damn it, I seem to have remembered something. At that moment, a large number of cracks appeared on the altar where Su Ming's real physical body was in the pillar of light. Cracking sounds rang out, and the number of cracks increased. In just the span of a few breaths, the entire altar melted. It did not crumble, but melted, turning into a large amount of murky, sticky liquid that let out waves of fragrance. When it spread out, it turned into fog that enveloped Su Ming's real, physical body and the ring. At the same time, the ring seemed to possess its own consciousness. The light spreading out from it shot through the fog and into Su Ming's real physical body. Immediately, Su Ming saw that his physical body in the fog had become transparent. He could see the venous pathways in his physical body, along with the vortexes between them. His entire body was packed densely together, as if the venous pathways had formed a huge and complicated runic symbol. It also looked like a complicated lock. To anyone else, those runic symbols were complicated and profound, but when Su Ming looked at them, he felt as if he had seen life within them. The runic symbols formed by the venous pathways were the brands of Abyss Builder's lives, and the lock formed by them was clearly the lock of Abyss Builder's blood. Dao Paragon, Zhang Ji Dao, Xing Ji Dao, who was dressed in a blue robe, immediately spoke. At the same time he spoke, the black-robed old man raised his hands and formed a seal. His body moved, and he charged into the pillar of light with Xingji Dao. Once he passed through it, he floated inside the pillar of light and sat down beside the white ring. The two of them sucked in a deep breath at the same time, then swiftly spread out their full cultivation bases and fused them into the white ring. Clearly, neither of them had the right to activate the ring on their own. Both of them had to attack at the same time, and only then could they barely do it. Su Ming moved his divine sense, and while he was in the black-robed old man's body, he immediately sensed the black-robed old man's cultivation base surging towards the white ring. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He had an urge to split a part of his divine sense to follow the ring. That urge was incredibly strong, so much so that even if Su Ming wanted to suppress it, he found himself unwilling to do so. This is Saint Defire's treasure. This sort of treasure. Su Ming's divine sense rippled, and he resolutely spread out a part of his divine sense to charge towards the white ring along with the black-robed old man's cultivation base. During the process, the bald crane did not know just how important this matter was. When Su Ming promised it crystals, it immediately stopped thinking about the memories in its head that seemed to be a mess. Instead, it did its best to change Su Ming's divine sense so that it looked exactly the same as the black-robed old man's cultivation base. The hint of divine sense Su Ming had spread out instantly surged into the white ring along with the black-robed man's cultivation base. At the instant it entered the ring, a loud bang immediately rang out in Su Ming's mind. He saw a vast world. There were mountains and rivers in that world, along with countless lives. However, if he took a closer look, he would find that some of the existences in that world, and even the world itself, were formed by various runic symbols. There were so many of them that even Su Ming could not count them clearly. He could only use the word countless to describe them. At the instant Su Ming saw the world, he noticed that the white ring was not activated by Xingji Dao and the black-robed old man. Their levels of cultivation were just a drop in the ocean to the supreme treasure. However, when their cultivation bases surged into the ring, they seemed to have activated some sort of seal in the ring. Once it was activated, everything formed by the runic symbols in the world disintegrated with loud bangs and turned into countless runic symbols that danced in the air. When Su Ming saw this, his heart trembled. He had a strong feeling that there was a path hidden in the runic symbols that he did not understand, but once he understood it, his level of cultivation would increase exponentially. This feeling was incredibly strong, causing Su Ming to focus all his attention on observing it. Soon after, when the entire world turned into countless runic symbols, Xingji Dao let out a low roar. Ditian, offer up all the things you've prepared over the years in one go. Use them to reverse the universe, turn the earth into the sky, and make time flow backwards. A glint appeared in Ditian's eyes. He suppressed the great excitement in his heart and threw his storage bag into the pillar of light. Once he did so, he formed a seal with his right hand and pointed forward. The storage bag immediately opened, and a large number of items he had prepared for countless years flew out. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1239. All of them were rare items in true Morning Dao world, and any one of them was enough to make countless cultivators go mad with desire. Their value was so great that it was difficult to describe them with words. Yet right then, at the instant they appeared, they melted in the pillar of light before their faces could be seen clearly. They turned into liquid and were swiftly absorbed by the white ring. The items Ditian had prepared for tens of thousands of years turned into liquid in the span of a dozen-something breaths, and all of them were absorbed by the white ring. Immediately after, a piercing white light spread out from the white ring. It shone and immediately spread out from the pillar of light to shoot in all directions. Once it enveloped an area of 800 million feet, the galaxy in that area disappeared. It was said to have disappeared because the darkness in the galaxy had disappeared, replaced by a layer of white light. There was a hint of blue in that light, causing all those who lifted their heads to look at it to have a strong misconception that the galaxy had turned into a blue sky. However, all of this caused Su Ming's heart to tremble, because he was the only person who saw the entire scene. In fact, even the black-robed old man and Xingji Dao did not see it, because they had only fused their cultivation bases into the ring. Their divine senses seemed to be filled with some form of respect, and they did not dare to spread their divine senses into the ring. Su Ming could clearly see the items Tian had prepared for tens of thousands of years melting. Once they were absorbed by the ring, they turned into a power that swiftly gathered the countless runic symbols in the world of the ring together. A great amount of power was needed for the countless runic symbols in the world of the ring to gather together for a short period of time. The materials Tian had prepared for tens of thousands of years could only somewhat satisfy this requirement, and as the countless runic symbols gathered together, they only turned into 3 runic symbols at that instant. The complexity of the 3 runic symbols caused Su Ming's divine sense to immediately crumble the moment he cast a glance at them. He could not withstand it. But even so, he had a strong feeling that all the runic symbols in the world of the ring had evolved from the continuous fusion of the 3 runic symbols. At the instant his divine sense shattered, Su Ming saw one of the 3 runic symbols shine with an endless amount of white light. It spilled out and formed a blue sky that covered a circular area of 800 million feet beyond the pillar of light. The entire sky was in truth just one runic symbol. Su Ming's heart trembled. A wisp of his divine sense might have been destroyed, but this time he did not hesitate. He split a portion of his divine sense and had it charge towards the white ring through the black-robed man's level of cultivation. This was a serendipity, a fortuitous event that a normal person would have a hard time running into. Even though Su Ming had come for his real physical body, he would absolutely not give up on this chance. He might not understand what the 3 runic symbols were, but he still wanted to see them, because his instincts told him that there was definitely a great connection between the 3 runic symbols and those in Avicania. At the instant Su Ming sent his Atman into the white ring again, he saw the second runic symbol spilling out. It was black, and at the instant it spread out, it turned the blue sky within an area of 800 million feet into black soil. This was black earth. Even though it was black in color, it was clearly different from the black of nothingness. It was solid earth, and it was covered by black earth. There was a blue sky and a land in the galaxy of 800 million feet. The galaxy in that area had been changed into a world of its own. The divine ability caused all of the cultivators in the area of 24 million meters to stare blankly. However, their confusion didn't last for very long. As the 3rd magical symbol spread out, everyone who saw it felt as if heaven and earth were being turned upside down. It was as if the world had been overturned at that moment. The blue sky became the land, and the land became the blue sky. The only ones who did not move were the people's bodies. But the disorderly feeling of the world being overturned caused all the cultivators' faces to turn pale and their minds to immediately feel dizzy. The world had been overturned. The power of the world reversing in the area of 800 million feet surged into the pillar of light at the center and gathered on Su Ming's real physical body. Boom! Su Ming's real physical body might still be transparent at that moment, but the Venus pathways and runic symbols in his body were trembling and distorting faintly. If the runic symbols on Su Ming's real physical body were a lock, then at that moment, under the power of the world reversing in reverse, the lock was also being reversed, and the lock was unlocked. Tian watched this scene with excitement beyond the pillar of light. He had a deep understanding of the Abyss Builders, and at that moment, he could tell that the lock on the Abyss Builder's blood in his physical body had been unlocked. At that moment, the runic symbols that had turned into the land, the sky, and the invisible runic symbols that had reversed the world shone at the same time. Immediately, booming sounds shook all of true Morning Tao world. Su Ming immediately sensed the three runic symbols circulating continuously. As they were arranged according to some sort of pattern, they spread out with a bang, the power of time and space similar to that of the Abyss Builders. At the instant the power of time and space appeared, it spread out in all directions. Sometimes it would flow rapidly in reverse time. This could be seen clearly on Dition and Baifeng. Sometimes their faces would become visibly older, and their presences would become even more ancient. At other times, Dition would look as if he was young, and it was the same for Baifeng. This change lasted for about a dozen breaths before it came to an abrupt halt. Time no longer flowed and did not flow backwards. Instead, it had come to a complete stop. At the instant it stopped, the power immediately shrank and gathered on Su Ming's real physical body in the pillar of light, causing everything in the world outside to return to normal. Only Su Ming's real physical body was cut off from the time in the world outside. It was in a state of absolute stillness. At the instant time came to a halt, Xingji Dao's exhausted voice traveled forth. Dition, hurry up and change your life. Dition threw his head back and roared. He immediately sat down cross-legged and struck his forehead with his right hand. Immediately, his body let out a bang and aged rapidly. In the span of a breath, he was reduced to pieces. However, when his body shattered, his nascent divinity flew out and started burning on its own in midair. It lasted for 2 breaths before it reached its limit. As his nascent divinity burned, a wisp of a golden soul appeared. Dition had used his physical body and nascent divinity to increase his nascent divinity's power exponentially for a short period of time. He had also burned the power of his nascent divinity to force out his soul, which had already fused with his nascent divinity. The golden color of his soul exuded the powerful power of a sublime paragon. In fact, with the burning of his physical body and nascent divinity, his soul recovered to the level of cultivation it had in the past. However, this could not last for long, and once time passed, the damage to his soul would be incredibly severe. However, there was no doubt that not only had Dition recovered his previous level of cultivation, he had even improved. Clearly, even though his level of cultivation was not as great as it was in the past, he had gained quite a lot of epiphanies in terms of his epiphany. At the instant that power appeared, even the black-robed old man and Xingji Dao lifted their heads to cast sidelong glances, and their pupils shrank slightly. At the same time, Dition's golden soul turned into a long golden arc and shot through the pillar of light that shot into the sky. It appeared within and stared at Su Ming's transparent physical body, which had already been frozen in place, greedily. He only casted a glance, and without any hesitation, he charged into Su Ming's real physical body. When Su Ming saw this, he laughed coldly in his heart. Since he had already come to this place and hid in the black-robed old man's body, he had done so for this moment. What Su Ming wanted to do was not to obtain a body before this happened. That was not realistic. What he wanted to do was very simple. He just needed to make Dition fail. Once he failed, then while he searched for another person to exchange his life with, Su Ming, who had already possessed the black-robed old man's body, would have enough time and confidence to easily seize back his real physical body. In fact, at the instant Dition's soul fused into Su Ming's real physical body, the black-robed old man helped Su Ming. A glint shone in his eyes, and black light immediately appeared on his body. It was the light of extreme darkness. The black-robed old man had promised Dition that he would use the light of extreme darkness to help him suppress Dition when he exchanged his life. Almost at the instant the light of extreme darkness appeared, Su Ming gave up on his original plan. Instead, he sent his divine sense out with the light of extreme darkness. When Dition's soul fused into his physical body, Su Ming's divine sense entered his real physical body for the first time. A warm feeling he had never felt before rose in his heart. It was the physical body he had desired for a long time. It was the real physical body he had dreamed of possessing. When he was in the land of berserkers, when Su Ming realized that he was just a soul, he had thought that one day he would definitely retrieve his physical body. Even when he had sunk into the barren lands of divine essence, this thought had persisted in the depths of Su Ming's heart for a long time. At that moment, he was so close to his physical body that he had never been able to get his divine sense to fuse with it. The feeling that he would only need some time to fuse with his divine sense gave Su Ming an urge to fuse with his physical body without regard for anything else. He could sense that the venous pathways in his physical body were being rapidly spread out by Tion while they were in absolute stillness. When they were completely spread out, Tion's life changing would succeed. Su Ming forced down the impulsive thought in his heart and laughed coldly. He only needed to make some slight changes, and he would be able to prevent Tion from succeeding. However, at the instant Su Ming was about to execute his method, an indescribable sense of danger rose in his heart. That sense of danger came from his real physical body. At the instant it appeared, Su Ming sensed a hint of unfamiliarity hidden under that sense of familiarity. That's not right. Su Ming, there's something wrong with this physical body. Soon after, the bald crane's shrill cry echoed in Su Ming's heart, and there was a hint of nervousness in it. Su Ming, there's something wrong with this physical body. Damn it, this is the 1 billion corpse soul seal. This is an incredibly diabolical forbidden art that only the sacred lady of the Dark Hall in Dark Dawn's camp can master. Su Ming, this isn't your physical body. This is an abyss builder's corpse created from 1 billion corpses after they were refined and fused together. Hurry up and retrieve your divine sense. If you're even a single step slower, you'll be doomed eternally. Damn it, who could be so diabolical? Once this corpse explodes, it can easily destroy a true world. Ahem, please give me monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to give me recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1240. When the bald crane's piercing voice reverberated in the air, a huge storm that had never been seen before raged in Su Ming's heart. He could not believe all of this, and it was even more difficult for him to believe it. In fact, in the depths of his heart, he did not want to believe it. He did not want to believe that his physical body, the physical body he had always thought belonged to him, was a malicious corpse created from 1 billion corpses. He did not want to believe that Su Xian did not know about all of this. He did not want to believe that his real physical body would be like this. This completely overturned all of Su Ming's previous memories and reversed all of his thoughts. Even with Su Ming's mental fortitude and his wisdom, he was still at a loss at that instant. There was an unprecedented anguish, sadness, and an indescribable pain in his heart. It was as if his heart had been dug out, and all of his knowledge had been turned upside down along with the world. Ever since he learned that he was just a soul and that his real physical body was in the land of the immortals, Su Ming had practically made finding his physical body a dream in his life. Yet now, when he was so close to his real physical body that he had never been before, the bald crane's words were like a blow to his head, causing his heart to tremble. It made him feel as if his soul and nascent divinity were being forcefully torn apart. Why? Su Ming mumbled, "Hurry up and leave. Damn it. Su Ming, hurry up and leave this damn physical body. This isn't your body. This is a huge trap created by someone. Hurry up and leave." The bald crane screamed shrilly, and an anxiety and madness that had never appeared before could be heard in its voice. However, Su Ming acted as if he did not hear it. He did not leave because he did not believe in all of this. He did not believe that his real physical body was just an illusion and that Dark Mountain was fake. This was an incredibly severe blow to Su Ming, and as time passed by, the wound that was torn apart by the blow had slowly healed. But now, if even my real physical body is fake, then what else is real in this world? Dark Mountain is fake, Bai Ling's love is fake, and my childhood playmates are also fake. What is real? What is real? Su Ming's nascent divinity trembled. He could not believe all of this. He could not withstand the strongest blow that could even surpass dark mountains. However, he could clearly sense the unfamiliarity hidden beneath the familiarity in his real physical body. That familiarity seemed to have been intentionally created by someone, and it had even tampered with Su Ming's memories, causing him to remain firm and unwavering. In fact, he had never doubted whether this physical body truly belonged to him. Why? Why is all of this happening? Su Ming's nascent divinity boiled. His divine sense ignored the bald crane's shrill and crazed warnings and fused into his real physical body without regard for anything else. He wanted to search for an answer that would change his previous impression and make him understand that all of this was not fake and that this was indeed his physical body. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that he had to find Su Ming's answer. He had to find an answer that would allow him to be deceived, and he would even be willing to be deceived. However, as Su Ming's divine sense fused into his real physical body and touched the core of it, a ripple that he could not suppress swiftly rose up in his divine sense, because he could clearly sense the unfamiliarity hidden beneath the familiarity in the core of the physical body. In fact, Su Ming even found the source of that familiarity. It was a drop of blood at the core of his real physical body. It was this drop of blood that filled the entire physical body, causing Su Ming to be so familiar with it. Su Ming laughed brokenly. With his wisdom, there was no way he would not understand the answer to all of this, but this answer was too cruel, so cruel that even Su Ming could not bear it. At that instant, he felt as if his heart had already died, and he was filled with an indescribable fatigue. He had been far too tired in his life. If he was just tired, that would have been fine, but the fake scenes that had happened one after another had caused Su Ming's fatigue to reach its peak. If it was not because he still had hope for his mother, if it was not because he still had Su Xianyi in his heart, even if he did not acknowledge him, if it was not because he still needed to find his real physical body, then he would have closed his eyes a long time ago and fallen into an eternal sleep. Yet at that moment, his thoughts were overturned, his dreams shattered, and everything that was fake caused Su Ming to feel as if he was crying in his anguish. This was the cry of someone without a physical body. It was his nascent divinity and his soul crying. It was the grief of his soul that had been hidden in Su Ming's body for countless years. At that moment, Su Ming was like the most miserable person in the world because his life seemed to no longer have any reality. Deep bewilderment, anguish, and sorrow turned into self-deprecation. As he mocked himself, he felt as if his life was being mocked and suppressed, and the flames of his life grew dimmer. For the first time in his life, he chose to run away, chose to close his eyes, chose to accept his fate. He accepted it. If all of this was fake, then he would accept it. If he accepted his fate, then he would not be so tired, and he would be able to end his laughable life. Su Ming accepted it. Even if his level of cultivation was extraordinary, even if his will was firm, even if he had gone through many things that a normal person would never have to go through, he was still a person, a normal person. He was a person who could be sad and hurt. Damn it, Su Ming, do you want to die? Are you willing to die here? Are you willing to give up on Yu Xian? In fact, you're willing to not be able to find your senior brothers? Are you willing to do this? There was an anxiety and sorrow in the bald crane's voice that had never appeared before. It had followed Su Ming all the way and gone through all sorts of obstacles with him. They had gone through all sorts of dangers, but now, at that instant, it could clearly sense Su Ming's will to die. This was not a will to die due to injuries. This was the death of his soul. It was a thick aura of death that spread out from his entire body once he no longer had any desire to live. This will to die terrified the bald crane. It made it seem to remember that there was once a person who was incredibly important to it. In the end, as the will to die filled the bald crane, it could only watch helplessly as that person's consciousness gradually disappeared, and gradually, he turned into a statue. He ended his life. He ended all signs of his existence in the world. He ended the brand of his life. Su Ming, is it worth it for you to do this? Is it worth it? If you die here, if you want to die, then darn it all, you can fight to the death with your enemies. I'll fight to the death with you. But you actually gave up on your life here. You actually gave up on everything. Have you forgotten Yu Xian? Su Ming's life, which was gradually fading away, seemed to have throbbed at that instant. Without you, who will protect Yu Xian? That damn Su Xian. How will he use Yu Xian? Do you know what she will do without you? I believe that she will die as well, and she will join you. At that moment, Su Ming's heart started throbbing again. Have you forgotten about third senior brother? Hu Zi. If he learns that you died, he will be so sad. He will go mad. He will reverse the world and create a dream with you in it, because you are his youngest junior brother. Have you forgotten about second senior brother? Darn it all, Su Ming, you have to know what will happen to second senior brother if you die. He will go mad. He will be sad, and this will become the greatest pain in his life, because you are his youngest junior brother. Have you forgotten about eldest senior brother? He no longer has a head. Do you want him to lose his heart because of you? Su Ming, you Damby Asterisk-starred. Don't you want to know the answer to all of this? Don't you want to find the person who has been manipulating you your entire life? You shouldn't die now. You coward. You coward. You gave up on them, and you gave up on me. Why you? If you really want to die, then I'll die with you. The bald crane screeched. Deep grief appeared in its eyes. Its words continued traveling outwards, and Su Ming's heart started throbbing even faster. Then, his will to die was instantly replaced by a powerful wave of madness. It was replaced by a will that hated the universe, the earth, and everything in the universe. That's right, that's it. I have to know the truth behind all of this. I have to kill. I have to kill until the universe turns crimson red. I have to kill until I become a supreme of arid, triad, expanse cosmos. I have to kill until I become a madness that will make even Saint Defire and Dark Dawn wary and retreat. Su Ming, you can't die. Su Ming's nascent divinity descended into complete madness at that moment. His divine sense instantly roared like a tidal wave, and his will to die was replaced by madness. His closed eyes were supported by a will that made him feel as if he had been reborn, and he opened them swiftly. His soul felt as if it had been reborn from fire at that moment. It seemed to have awakened, and at that moment, it felt as if it had gone through a metamorphosis in hell. Intense pain existed in Su Ming's soul, causing his madness to become even stronger. He no longer cared about the pain of his soul being torn apart. Since he had already opened his eyes, then he would rise to power through the pain. During that instant, Su Ming saw his soul shatter under the intense pain of it being torn apart. As it shattered, scenes that seemed to be hidden in his soul and that he would never see in his life appeared before Su Ming's eyes along with the intense pain. He saw a galaxy filled with chaos. He saw countless races fighting against each other in a frenzy. He saw an endless amount of corpses, hundreds of people exuding the presence of those in Life Realm, and some of them even exuded the mighty pressure of those in Death Realm. They surrounded a black-haired, middle-aged man. The man held a baby in one hand and a long blade in the other. There were hundreds of corpses around him, and each of them were powerful warriors who were above Life Realm when they were alive. In fact, there were even some in Death Realm. The middle-aged man had an awe-inspiring righteousness about him, as well as a will that would not make him submit even if the world collapsed. As he fought, he threw his head back and laughed long and hard at the sky. There were already countless wounds on his body, and his cultivation base was swiftly weakening. However, his presence was filled with a raging, fighting spirit. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1241. This battle intent shocked the experts around him, and they couldn't help but show respect in their eyes. Ming Er, you have a good life because I am your father. I am just a normal member of the Abyss Builders, but my existence is something that even the royal family has to respect. And you, if this battle had not happened, You would have definitely been brought up by me to become an existence that would surpass me and the other princes. You would have become my son, and even the progenitor of abyss builders would have to pay attention to you. But you have a bad life because you are my son, and because you will die with me in this battle. Are you afraid?" The middle-aged man threw his head back and laughed long and hard. He swung the long blade in his hand, and an indescribably domineering power erupted with a bang. It cut off the head of an almighty in life realm and destroyed his nascent divinity. His blood gushed out and landed on the baby's face. The baby stuck out his tongue, and as if he was sucking milk, he swallowed the blood and grinned happily. "This is my son, as expected of your father. When I snuck into Dark Dawn and seized your mother's essence of the sacred race, it didn't matter whether she was willing or not. She still gave birth to you. But you truly have a bad life." The middle-aged man lowered his head and stared at the baby in his arms. There was a domineering kindness in his divine sense, along with sadness. Booming sounds echoed in the air, and the slaughter began. Su Ming stared at everything in the picture and at the tall and mighty middle-aged man. That was not Su Xian-yi, but a stranger who had never appeared in Su Ming's memories. But this stranger made Su Ming's soul tremble when he saw him. He had a feeling as if he was that baby, the one who had smiled while licking his enemy's blood. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, the picture continued changing until Su Ming saw everything in the picture turn into a dazzling display of fireworks in the galaxy. Those fireworks were lit by lives, released everything, and also submerged everything. The man and the baby in his arms were reduced to nothingness in the brilliant firework. Only one sentence seemed to echo quietly in the galaxy. "Ming-er, if there's a next life, your father will still be your father. If there's a next life, I will teach you how to cultivate the Tao. I will lead you through the heavens. I will love you for a lifetime because you are my son. Even if I die, you must remember that your father is called Su Zhan. As for that cheap mother of yours, if that woman knows that I'm dead, perhaps she'll cry, perhaps she won't. But no matter what, I, Su Zhan, have never let down the heavens, the earth, the clan, or my good friend." The end of the scene caused Su Ming's soul to feel as if it was being torn apart. Intense pain filled Su Ming's body and mind, but he no longer cared about it, because he saw a memory that had clearly been sealed appear after the scene ended. After an unknown number of years, a person walked out of the galaxy filled with corpses. That was Su Xian-yi. Su Xian-yi walked out quietly from the galaxy filled with death. He stood there for a long, long time, and grief appeared in his eyes. When he turned around and was about to leave, he suddenly let out a soft gasp of surprise. When he lifted his right hand, he seized a weak soul from the galaxy. It was the soul of a weak infant. It was a soul that his father had chosen to protect when he died. It was a remnant soul that was still struggling to survive on this desolate battlefield because of the strangeness that came from his mother's race. Su Ming saw Su Xian-yi staring at the soul, and after a long, long time had passed, he mumbled one sentence. "Su Zhan, to let me leave with my wife smoothly, you lured away my enemies. You knew that I would come to this place one day, which is why you self-destructed to protect your child. Then from now on, this child will be my son," Su Xian-yi said softly. When he turned around, he took away all the corpses in the place. He took away all the corpses from the entire fifth true world, the corpses from both sides, and the drop of blood that had been pressed down on the center of the infant's brows. Then he left the place. "Your father sacrificed himself to protect his race. You will follow your father's unfinished will and sacrifice yourself so that our race can rise to power. Are you willing to do so?" Su Xian-yi asked softly while staring at the fragile soul in his hand. However, there was a hint of cold madness in his words, causing the infant's soul to feel a sense of terror. It shuddered as if it was about to disappear. "You will be willing." Su Xian-yi lifted his left hand, and with a hint of brutality, he yanked out the blood from the soul and split it up with the soul. When he turned around, he left into the distance. When another scene appeared, Su Ming saw a woman. It was a beautiful and gentle woman. She was staring at Su Ming blankly, and pain appeared on her face. I don't agree. Su Zhan died in battle for us. We can't. This is my choice. Su Zhan died for the race. He died a worthy death. An aloof voice interrupted the woman's words. He didn't die for the race. He died so that we could leave. With his level of cultivation, he could have taken his child and escaped smoothly. We can't do this to his child. He was Su Zhan's son before, and from now on, he is also my child. If we don't do this, our child will die. Compared to my blood, the fact that this broken soul has the right to help us is already a great honor for him. Even if Su Zhan was still alive, he would still agree to this. You're mad, Su Xianyi. You're mad. The scene disappeared again. When it appeared again, Su Ming was in the woman's arms while she floated in the vast galaxy. The woman's presence was weak, and she was already on the verge of death. Tears fell from her eyes, and she lowered her head to look at Su Ming. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you learn of all of this someday, you can blame me, but please spare my child. I'm truly sorry. Our family has let your father down, and we've let you down even more. Su Ming, my child. The scene ended in Su Ming's mind. His soul was no longer in intense pain, and neither was he at a loss. The continuous madness had already caused Su Ming to no longer be bothered by pain, and he would no longer be at a pointless loss. There was only a smile on his face. It was a smile filled with madness, a smile that could destroy everything. That smile was no longer one of self-deprecation, but one that was filled with a terrifying aloofness and a long string of laughter that echoed in Su Ming's nascent divinity. There was a shrill note to that laughter, along with Su Ming's monstrous hate. I'm sorry, huh? Su Ming's Atman moved swiftly and swept up the bald crane. At the instant, Tian successfully refined the 1 billion corpses into a physical body. Su Ming's Atman left and returned to the white ring, then to the black-robed old man's body. At the instant his Atman left the physical body, all the Venus pathways in it shone with a dazzling light. When he opened his eyes, a brilliant light shone in them. He had already become Tian. Joy and excitement appeared on Tian's face. He slowly sat up, threw his head back, and laughed. The black-robed old man and Xing Jidao both smiled. Baifeng also saw this scene from beyond the pillar of light, and anticipation appeared in her eyes. But at that moment, the white ring suddenly shone with a powerful light. As it shone, a powerful sense of danger was sent into Xing Jidao and the black-robed old man's hearts. At the same time, Tian's laughter came to an abrupt halt. He lowered his head to look at his body, and disbelief as well as shock appeared in his eyes. His body looked as if it had melted at that moment, and countless faces appeared on it. They were so densely packed together that it was impossible to count how many there were. A presence that could destroy an expanse cosmos erupted from his body. It was so strong that it caused Tian's expression to change drastically, and Xing Jidao's pupils to shrink. There's something wrong with his corpse. This is the forbidden art of Dark Dawn's Dark Hall, the 1 billion soul seal. The black-robed old man let out a powerful roar. His expression twisted, and disbelief as well as shock appeared in his eyes. His voice even quivered at that moment. This is the 1 billion soul seal. When the black-robed old man instinctively repeated it again, he screamed and swiftly charged outwards. Shock appeared on his face, along with fear that had never appeared on his face before. Xing Jidao shuddered violently. He let out a roar of despair, and with one move, he chose to leave the pillar of light as well. But at that moment, the physical body Tian had just gained control of let out a loud bang that shook the sky and earth and spread through all of true Morning Dao world. At the instant that loud bang rang out, Tian let out a shrill scream of pain. He wanted to leave the body regardless of the cost, but he could not do so. There was an indescribable hate in his screams. Su Xianyi. This was Tian's final voice in his life. He was the hero of his generation, the sublime paragon who had fought against Su Xianyi for tens of thousands of years, the one with astonishing power in the past. His voice was instantly drowned out by the booming sounds. In the midst of them, the body he had just gained control of exploded. The explosion of 1 billion bodies and the collapse of Dark Dawn's forbidden art caused the power that erupted from the body to surpass that of a sublime paragon. In fact, no one knew whether it was close to Avacania realm or whether it had surpassed Avacania realm. No one knew the specifics, but it was the first stage of Su Xianyi's plan, a perfect strike. This was a self-destruction that could destroy an entire true world. It was a madness that Di Tian had personally refined and helped by Saint Defire Expanse Cosmos. Its collapse could destroy all the lives in True Morning Dao World, along with the planet and the galaxy. From then on, True Morning Dao World would no longer exist among the 4 great true worlds, only the 3 of them. The destructive power that could destroy an entire true world gathered in the area of the Pillar of Light, causing it to be torn apart under the peak of power. The Pillar of Light was no longer a Pillar of Light, but turned into the one and only gap in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos that had never been seen before in all of Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos. The appearance of the gap would allow the cultivators from Saint Defire to descend in large numbers. In fact, their cultivation bases would no longer need to be suppressed, and they would not need to reconstruct their bodies. In fact, besides those in Avacania realm, no matter how strong they would not be affected. They could descend in large numbers with their bodies intact. It was as if the gate to hell had been opened. This was Su Xianyi's plan, because once the gap appeared, Dark Dawn, who was preparing a new relocation path, would be forced to give up on their previous preparations after Su Xian. He used Su Ming to destroy the same Pillar of Light. They would be forced to attack Saint Defire at full force and use the shortest amount of time to seize the only gap. After all, they could not let Saint Defire enjoy it alone, because whichever camp gained complete control over Arid Triad would completely destroy all the existences in the other camp. The first stage of Su Xianyi's plan was for the war between Dark Dawn and Saint Defire to instantly reach its climax and reach an unprecedented level of madness. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1242. The whirlwind formed by the power of the world swept outward from the area that was once the Immortals' Union. As it tumbled about, piercing howls spread out in all directions at an even faster speed. It was said that it was once the place had been reduced to ruins. Countless immortals had perished, countless planets had been crushed, and countless sects had been instantly destroyed. All of this might not have reached the level of destroying the universe of a true world, but it was not the self-destruction of the 1 billion corpse soul seal. It was just the power of the world between Saint Defire and Arid Triad spilling out. Yet even so, to True Morning Dao World, it was still a great disaster. And an even greater disaster was that a huge gap had been torn open in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos by the seal of 1 billion dead souls, which could destroy an entire true world. The appearance of the gap was like someone cracking open a hole in a huge egg that was in the process of decaying. This caused the decaying power that could give birth to the dragon of the 9 heavens to begin flowing away. At the same time, a large amount of aura from the world outside surged in, causing the space around the gap to show signs of corrosion. This might have been slow, but it was happening constantly. Perhaps once this process lasted for a certain amount of time, Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos would lose its right to become the 3rd camp that stood above Saint Defire and Dark Dawn. If Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos had life and could feel pain, then at that moment, it would feel an indescribable pain and the loss of its life. It would then spread this pain to all the lives born in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, causing the predecessor of Dao, Ocean, to tumble about in Morning Dao sect and let out a pained roar. At the same time, countless planets in the galaxies that had not been affected by the whirlwind formed by the power of the world in True Morning Dao World trembled. Countless living beings roared in pain. They instinctively sensed that their lives were flowing away. An intense pain, as if a part of them was missing, came from their bodies and souls. It was the same for all sorts of lives, including the cultivators. It did not matter whether they came from the Immortals Union or the disciples from Morning Tao sect. During that instant, all of them sensed intense pain in their bodies. They sensed their lives flowing away, and an indescribable fear rose within them. It was as if the heavens were different than they had been in the past. It was as if an enormous, invisible shield had suddenly cracked open. True Morning Tao world was not the only one affected. The same scene appeared in all the lives in true Sacredine world. It also appeared in the hearts of all the cultivators. The pain in their souls and the trembling of all the planets caused true Sacredine world to fall into complete chaos for a period of time. At the same time, all the powerful warriors in true Sacredine world, especially those who were above Fate Realm, true Sacredine world's Copal Lords, and true Sacredine world's Sublime Paragons, sensed everything clearly. In the starry sky, there were 5 mountains floating in the void. The 5 mountains shone with dazzling light of 5 different colors. At the peak of the mountain in the middle was a middle-aged man. He stood silently at the top of the mountain, raising his head to look at the endless void in the sky. His expression was gloomy, but there was also a hint of shock. I can sense that a huge gap has been opened in Arid Triad's true Morning Tao world. The power to protect Arid Triad does not exist in that gap. You can sense this because you have fused with true Sacredine world. What you sense is true Sacredine world's epiphany. A faint voice came from the area around him. As the air distorted, a boy dressed in a red robe walked out from beside the middle-aged man. The boy looked incredibly young, but there was an ancient look in his eyes that could not be imagined. It was a look that could cause all those who looked into it to be lost in it. Lord Sublime Paragon. The middle-aged man cast the boy a glance, then wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed slightly. Many years ago, I sensed true Morning Tao world's Sublime Paragon's presence suddenly becoming incredibly weak. Then he disappeared. Clearly, he hid himself. Just now, I sensed his presence again, but it only lasted for an instant before it disappeared. At the same time, I sensed a destructive power that even I did not dare to touch in the direction of true Morning Tao world. In fact, I was afraid of it. This power can easily destroy a sublime paragon like me, and it can even destroy a true world, the boy said calmly while looking in the direction of true Morning Tao world. His words immediately caused the middle-aged man's expression to change. This destructive power that even I am afraid of did not destroy true Morning Tao world. Instead, it opened up a gap in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos. A complicated look appeared on the boy's face. In fact, even with his level of cultivation, he could not help but show a hint of deep anxiety on his face at that moment. Send word to true Sacredine world to make the strongest preparations for war. Have all the cultivators in the true world prepare for a war that has never happened before. The war is about to begin, and it will be unprecedentedly intense. It will be a war between Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos and the worlds beyond. You must be prepared to die in this war. Even I will most likely die, and it's even more so for the other cultivators. You must be prepared for true Sacredine world to be completely destroyed. War, the boy said softly. The middle-aged man's breathing had already quickened at that moment. His pupils shrank. If it was not because he respected the boy greatly and anyone else had told him these things, he would definitely not have believed them. Yet at that moment, these were the words of true Sacredine world's sublime paragon. In fact, he had even prepared to die. This caused the middle-aged man, the Copal Lord of true Sacredine world, to feel an indescribable terror. The same scene appeared in the Emperor of Abyss true world. However, besides the tremors in the planets and the terror and intense pain from the cultivators, the Emperor of Abyss, the person with the highest will in true Yellow's true world besides the sublime paragon, was very quiet. In an unknown region of the Emperor of Abyss true world was a luxurious palace that towered into the clouds. There was a figure standing by the window of the palace. He placed his hands behind his back and stared outside. The sunlight was scattered everywhere, making it impossible to see his face clearly. They could only see his back. He stood there quietly and watched the roars in the sky, as well as the panic of the cultivators in the true world. However, there seemed to be a hint of a smile at the corners of his lips. The Lord Sublime Paragon is about to return. The second stage of the plan should be about to begin. A barely audible mumble tumbled out of the man's mouth faintly before disappearing into the sunlight shining through the window. The fourth true world was the most mysterious among the four great true worlds. In fact, only a few people had the right to know its name, True Spirit Hell World. At the instant the gap leading to Saint Defire's camp in True Morning Dow World was torn open, countless shrill roars reverberated through the entire True Spirit Hell World. Those roars seemed to have come from almost all the regions in the fourth true world. They were connected together, causing the entire fourth true world to tremble violently. Those roars came from pain, but also from a form of madness. At the same time, as the roars reverberated in the air, there were cultivators in various regions of the fourth true world who had not made a single sound. Their faces were pale, but they still maintained their aloof demeanor. There were many of them, and there were quite a number of them in almost every region. They were all dressed in the same robes, but at that moment, as the roars reverberated in the air, they immediately started trembling, and a grave expression that had never appeared on their faces before appeared on their faces. Arid Triad has a gap. Let me out. Let me go. I'm willing to fight for Arid Triad. Haha, a gap has appeared in Arid Triad. I can sense Arid Triad expanse, cosmos pain. All of you must die. All of you must die. This is the presence of the power of the world. And it's also the presence of those damned cultivators from the world beyond. You bunch of juniors who deserve to die for your crimes. Is this the world we handed to you at ease? Why aren't you opening your spirit hell and letting us out? All sorts of roars echoed in the air. What was terrifying was that each of them contained an incredibly powerful cultivation base. It was so terrifying that as they roared, most of the cultivators guarding the true world coughed up blood while their hearts trembled. Seniors, please calm down. Without the orders of the other sublime paragons and culpal lords, it would be impossible for me to open spirit hell and let you out. Even if a disaster that Arid Triad expands cosmos cannot fight against appears, it has nothing to do with spirit hell. Seniors, please be quiet. The old and aloof voice spread through the entire fourth true world, but what it received was roars that were even louder than before. However, no matter how they roared, the cultivators guarding the place did not say a single word. Even the ancient voice no longer said a single word. At the same time, the whirlwind formed by the power of the world in True Morning Dow World continued sweeping through the area. At the core of the whirlwind was the spot where the pillar of light had once reached the heavens. The cocoon that was by foam was being weakened by the wind formed by the power of the world. By the looks of it, she would only last for dozens of breaths before completely disappearing. Not too far away from the cocoon was a white light shining in the whirlwind. It was the white ring from Saint Defire. At that moment, it was slowly rising into the sky. By the looks of it, it wanted to go against the power of the world and forcefully return to Saint Defire's camp through the gap. Zhang Dao, we have to leave this accursed place as soon as possible and report everything to the 3 Saint Defires. This accursed place actually has Dark Dawn making such preparations. You have to help me. We definitely can't stay here. Before long, this place will attract a large number of cultivators from Arid Triad. We can't let Saint Defire's supreme treasure be snatched away by others. Xingji Dao roared in the white ring. His nascent divinity's eyes were bloodshot, and he was urging all his strength to control the white ring. The eyes of the black-robed old man who had already been possessed by Su Ming sparkled slightly. He nodded, then lifted his hands and sent his cultivation base into the white ring. The pressure on Xingji Dao immediately lessened, but the instant he did so, a powerful sense of danger caused his expression to change drastically. Zhang Dao, what are you doing? The network isn't good. Everyone, don't be anxious. Today, there will definitely be 4 updates. Chapter 1243. This was external. As for internal, at the instant Su Ming's divine sense returned to the black-robed old man, the black-robed old man was about to rush out of the pillar of light with fear and disbelief. At that moment, Su Ming sensed a great sense of danger. This danger did not come from his real physical body, which he thought was his real self, but from his nascent divinity's right hand. Su Ming's right hand was the arm that could release power that surpassed his level of cultivation. At that moment, it gave off a wave of power that threatened Su Ming's life. His right hand did not choose to self-destruct like his physical body. Instead, it looked as if it had melted and turned into a power that nourished the seed of life extermination in his nascent divinity. This power might not be able to harm Su Ming directly, but it could make the seed of life extermination slowly parasitize Su Ming's soul. It would slowly change from its state of absorbing Su Ming's soul to an incomparably violent state, turning into a form of naked plunder. This sort of plunder could not last for long. Only when the seed of life extermination was about to mature would it erupt, and with a short period of madness, it would instantly become complete. Su Xianyi, what a man you are. I don't know whether you have a follow-up to your plan, but by the looks of it now, this might just be the first part of your plan. To the outside world, you made the 1 billion corpse soul seal self-destruct to destroy the pillar of light, overturn the defiant world in dark dawn, and to the inside world, you used my soul to nourish the seed of life extermination. This thing is only half because I'm not your child. I'm just nourishment for you to use to recover your true child. If I hadn't seen all of this, even if I died, I wouldn't know the reason. Su Ming fell silent. He already understood that his fake physical body was something Su Xianyi was using. His soul had also clearly been completely calculated by Su Xianyi. However, Su Ming still remained silent. He might have come to understand all of this, but he still wanted to know whether Su Xianyi's plan was to completely destroy him. Did Su Xianyi have another goal after he used him? Or did Su Xianyi give up on the seed of life extermination once it matured and became useless? This question was incredibly important to Su Ming. He wanted to know. It was not difficult for Su Ming to know the answer to this question. When he saw his soul gradually showing signs of burning as his right hand melted and the seed of life extermination went into a frenzy, Su Ming knew his answer. It wanted to burn everything in his soul to complete the final stage of its maturity. A smile appeared on his face as he shook his head. His smile was carefree, as if he was bidding farewell to the past, as if he had finally grown up from a young child. At that moment, Su Ming seemed to have truly grown up. All of this was like a single point that cut off his past, because at that moment, he should have died. He should have died in the seed of life extermination in his soul, in Su Xianyi's plan. From now on, the Su Ming you speak of has already died. The one who will appear in the world again will be another callous and merciless person. As Su Ming mumbled, the destructive power of the physical body he once believed to be his erupted from within the black-robed old man's body. At the instant it crumbled with a bang. Su Ming chose to possess it. He wanted to possess the black-robed old man and the new life he would have after he possessed his physical body. Su Xianyi, you resurrected me from a fragment of my soul to where I am now. Even though you did all of this to use my soul to nourish the seed of life extermination, this is still a kindness you showed me. You allowed me to grow from a weak soul fragment to who I am today. If it wasn't for you, I might have disappeared a long time ago. I will never forget this kindness. Since you want my soul to complete half of the seed of life extermination's maturation, then there is no harm in me giving it to you. At the moment Su Ming chose to possess the black-robed old man, he felt as if he had been reborn through fire. Booming sounds echoed in space, and they became stronger than they had ever been. When they spread through all of true Morning Tao world, they traveled through the pillar of light and reached the galaxy belonging to Saint Defire's camp. Booming sounds reverberated in space. DTon's was wiped off, and a power that could destroy true morning Tao world spread out. The destruction did not affect the area beyond the Pillar of Light. Instead, it charged into Saint Defire's galaxy through the Pillar of Light. The space in true morning Tao world was torn apart by the destructive power, and a huge gap was formed. Countless shrill screams of pain seemed to echo from the other side of space. Those screams came from the people in Saint Defire's camp who were controlling the Pillar of Light that reached into the sky, and they all died. The power that could destroy an entire true world erupted at that moment. As booming sounds surged into the heavens, the Pillar of Light shattered. Countless shards of Tao swept up and tore through space as well as the galaxy, but even more power rose into the sky and tore a huge gap in arid triad expanse cosmos. Xingji Dao was one of the 8 paramount Daos of Saint Defire who had just descended. He was a powerful existence with an illustrious status in Saint Defire's galaxy, and his level of cultivation was high. But even he had most of his body crumble when the destructive power erupted. Only his nascent divinity managed to escape. With a terrified expression, he charged through the destructive power. He endured the terrifying injuries, and at that moment, the only thought in his mind was to escape. Fortunately, he still had the white ring around him. It was the supreme treasure from Saint Defire, and it was the only thing that could fight against the destructive power. With the fastest speed he could muster, Xingji Dao instantly rushed into the white ring in fear. He looked at the Pillar of Light outside shattering, and at the endless space above the Pillar of Light tearing open a huge gap. He saw countless shrill screams of pain coming from Saint Defire's camp through the gap. He shuddered, and disbelief appeared in his eyes. Mad. The people from arid triad expanse cosmos are mad. This is also a scheme. This is Dark Dawn's scheme. At the same time, the black-robed old man let out a shrill scream of pain. His body trembled, and madness appeared on his face. It shone brilliantly, as if he was fighting against some sort of possession that was coming from his body. That's right, true morning Tao world, the black-robed old man said. His robes were torn, revealing his old face and thin body. Countless wounds could be seen on his body, and at that moment, a large amount of blood spilled out of his body before it was instantly reduced to nothingness. However, all of this was insignificant compared to the fear in his heart. His fear originally came from the self-destruction of Detion's body, but it only lasted for a moment before it changed in an instant. He sensed a power within his body that was trying to take over his body. The appearance of this power of possession was incredibly discreet. In fact, the black-robed old man only noticed it when most of his body was possessed. The shock and terror brought to him by this discovery instantly reached its peak. In fact, the black-robed old man did not even know who the power of possession belonged to. He did not know why the power of possession had come from his own body instead of forcefully possessing him from the world outside, as was common knowledge. The timing of the power of possession was especially terrifying. It was when the black-robed old man was fighting against the collapse of the world around him with his full strength. At the instant his body was defenseless, the power of possession appeared like a bolt of lightning and instantly possessed him. The light of extreme darkness shone brilliantly around his body. As he charged towards the white ring, he closed in on it. At the instant he rushed in, the madness in his eyes, which were hidden in the light of extreme darkness, was no longer there. Instead, they turned into an aloof gaze that was as cold as ice. At that moment, he was no longer Zhangji Dao, one of Saint Defire's 8 paramount Daos. He was the reborn Su Ming. The speed of his possession was so quick that it was unprecedented. After all, the current Su Ming was already incredibly strong, and his soul was burning due to the stimulation from his melting right hand. This increased the speed of his possession, and since he was still hiding in the black-robed man's body, the speed of his possession became even faster. Also, Su Ming's timing was incredibly perfect. It meant that the black-robed man did not even have the slightest bit of notice before Su Ming possessed most of his body. Because of it, Su Ming could complete his possession in the span of a few breaths and even devour the black-robed man's soul in one go. The power of his soul instantly fused with Su Ming's soul and became nourishment for the seed of life extermination. At the same time it devoured Su Ming's soul, it also replenished it. Damn it, what's going on? Zhangji Dao, what's going on? Xingji Dao's nascent divinity trembled. When he saw Su Ming rush into the white ring, he immediately voiced his doubts. He also lifted his head to look at the huge gap in space formed after the pillar of light shattered. This is Su Xianyi's plan. While hidden under the light of extreme darkness, Su Ming stared at Xingji Dao as if he was looking at prey. The power of the world turned into a whirlwind that spilled out of the gap. It swept out in all directions, and as if it had erupted for the first time in countless years, it filled a small part of true morning Tao world. No one knew how long the power of the world would last, but when it weakened, Saint Defier Expanse Cosmos would definitely descend en masse. At the same time, while the power of the world filled the area, it was clear that Dark Dawn would definitely launch a heinous slaughter beyond Arid Triad to fight against Saint Defier Expanse Cosmos for the only entrance that could allow them to descend perfectly into Arid Triad. As the power of the world surged madly beyond the White Ring, the invisible whirlwind could destroy everything. Countless cultivators in the Immortals' Union died, and the sects and clans were instantly reduced to nothingness. Bai Feng was the closest. At that moment, she had already coughed up an unknown amount of blood. As her face turned pale, she was surrounded by a huge cocoon. It was crimson red, as if it could turn into a fire phoenix. This was one of Phoenix Sect's ultimate life-saving arts, and it could only be used once in a person's life. Phoenix transformation. At that moment, all those who had the right to notice what was happening in true Morning Tao world in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos were shocked. Even if they did not notice it, the change in the galaxy still caused their hearts to tremble. A powerful, mighty pressure enveloped them and cast a shadow over their hearts. I'm late. My apologies, my fellow Taoists. Today is the 4th chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1244. The whirlwind formed by the power of the world swept outwards from the area that was once the Immortals' Union. As it tumbled about, piercing howls spread out in all directions at an even faster speed. It was said that it was once the place had been reduced to ruins. Countless immortals had died, countless planets shattered, and countless sects and clans were instantly destroyed. All of this might not have reached the level of destroying the universe of a true world, but it was not the self-destruction of the 1 billion corpse soul seal. It was just the power of the world between Saint Defier and Arid Triad spilling out. Yet even so, to true Morning Tao world, it was still a great disaster. And an even greater disaster was that a huge gap had been torn open in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos by the seal of 1 billion dead souls, which could destroy an entire true world. The appearance of the gap was like someone cracking a hole in a huge egg that was in the process of decaying. This caused the decaying power that could give birth to the dragon of the 9 heavens to begin flowing away. At the same time, a large amount of aura from the world outside surged in, causing the space around the gap to show signs of corrosion. This might have been slow, but it was happening constantly. Perhaps once this process went on for a certain amount of time, Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos would lose its right to become the 3rd camp that stood above Saint Defier and Dark Dawn. If Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos had life and could feel pain, then at that moment, it would feel an indescribable pain and the loss of its life. It would then spread this pain to all the lives born in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, causing the predecessor of Tao, Ocean, to tumble about in Morning Tao sect and let out a pained roar. At the same time, countless planets in the galaxies that had not been affected by the whirlwind formed by the power of the world in true Morning Tao world trembled. Countless living beings roared in pain. They instinctively sensed that their lives were flowing away. An intense pain, as if a part of them was missing, came from their bodies and souls. It was the same for all sorts of lives, including the cultivators. It did not matter whether they came from the Immortals Union or the disciples from Morning Tao sect. During that instant, all of them sensed intense pain in their bodies. They sensed their lives flowing away, and an indescribable fear rose within them. It was as if the universe was different from before. It was as if a huge, invisible barrier had cracked at that moment. True Morning Tao world was not the only one affected. The same thing happened to all the lives in True Sacredine world, as well as the cultivators' hearts. The pain of their souls being torn apart and the trembling of all the planets caused True Sacredine world to fall into complete chaos for a period of time. At the same time, all the powerful warriors in True Sacredine world, especially those who were above Fate Realm, and even the culpable lords of True Sacred True world and sublime paragons sense clearly. In the starry sky, there were 5 mountains floating in the void. The 5 mountains shone with dazzling lights of 5 different colors. On the mountain in the middle was a middle-aged man. He stood silently at the top of the mountain, raising his head to look at the endless void in the sky. His expression was gloomy, but there was also a hint of shock. I can sense that a huge gap has been opened in Arid Triad's True Morning Tao world. The power protecting Arid Triad doesn't exist in that gap. You can sense this because you have fused with True Sacred True world. What you sense is True Sacred True world's epiphany. A faint voice came from the area around him. As the air distorted, a boy dressed in a red robe walked out from beside the middle-aged man. The boy looked incredibly young, but there was an ancient look in his eyes that could not be imagined. It was a look that could cause all those who looked into it to be lost in it. Lord Sublime Paragon. The middle-aged man cast the boy a glance, then wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed slightly. Many years ago, I sensed True Morning Tao world's Sublime Paragon's presence suddenly becoming incredibly weak. Then he disappeared. Clearly, he hid himself. Just now, I sensed his presence again, but it only lasted for an instant before it disappeared. At the same time, I sensed a destructive power that even I did not dare to touch in the direction of True Morning Tao world. In fact, I was afraid of it. This power can easily destroy a sublime paragon like me, and it can even destroy a true world, the boy said calmly while looking in the direction of True Morning Tao world. His words immediately caused the middle-aged man's expression to change. This destructive power that even I am afraid of did not destroy True Morning Tao world. Instead, it opened up a gap in Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos. A complicated look appeared on the boy's face. In fact, even with his level of cultivation, he could not help but show a hint of deep anxiety on his face at that moment. Send word to True Sacred True world to make the strongest preparations for war. Have all the cultivators in the True world prepare for a war that has never happened before. The war is about to begin, and it will be unprecedentedly intense. It will be a war between Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos and the worlds beyond. You must be prepared to die in this war. Even I will most likely die, and it's even more so for the other cultivators. You must be prepared for True Sacred True world to be completely destroyed. War, the boy said softly. The middle-aged man's breathing had already quickened at that moment. His pupils shrank. If it was not because he respected the boy greatly and anyone else had told him these things, he would definitely not have believed them. Yet at that moment, these were the words of True Sacred True world's sublime paragon. In fact, he had even prepared to die. This caused a middle-aged man, the culpable lord of True Sacred True world, to feel an indescribable terror. The same scene appeared in the Emperor of Abyss True world. However, besides the tremors in the planets and the terror and intense pain from the cultivators, the Emperor of Abyss, the person with the highest will in True Yellow True world besides the sublime paragon, was very quiet. In an unknown region of the Emperor of Abyss True World was a luxurious palace that towered into the clouds. There was a figure standing by the window of the palace. He placed his hands behind his back and stared outside. The sunlight scattered everywhere, making it impossible to see his face clearly. They could only see his back. He stood there quietly and watched the roars in the sky, as well as the panic of the cultivators in the true world. However, there seemed to be a hint of a smile at the corners of his lips. The Lord Sublime Paragon is about to return. The second stage of the plan should be about to begin. A barely audible mumble tumbled out of the man's mouth faintly before disappearing into the sunlight shining through the window. The fourth true world was the most mysterious among the four great true worlds. In fact, only a few people had the right to know its name, True Spirit Hell World. At the instant the gap leading to Saint Defire's camp in True Morning Tao World was torn open, countless shrill roars reverberated through the entire True Spirit Hell World. Those roars seemed to have come from almost all the regions in the fourth true world. They were connected together, causing the entire fourth true world to tremble violently. Those roars came from pain, but also from a form of madness at the same time. As the roars reverberated in the air, there were cultivators in various regions of the fourth true world who had not made a single sound. Their faces were pale, but they still maintained their aloof demeanor. There were many of them, and there were quite a number of them in almost every region. They were all dressed in the same robes. But at that moment, as the roars reverberated in the air, they immediately started trembling, and a grave expression that had never appeared on their faces before appeared on their faces. Arid Triad has a gap. Let me out. Let me go. I'm willing to fight for Arid Triad. Haha. A gap has appeared in Arid Triad. I can sense Arid Triad expanse cosmos pain. All of you must die. All of you must die. This is the presence of the power of the world, and it's also the presence of those damned cultivators from the worlds beyond. You bunch of juniors who deserve to die for your crimes. Is this the world we handed to you at ease? Why aren't you opening your spirit hell and letting us out? All sorts of roars echoed in the air. What was terrifying was that each of them contained an incredibly powerful cultivation base. It was so terrifying that as they roared, most of the cultivators guarding the true world coughed up blood while their hearts trembled. Seniors, please calm down. Without the orders of the other sublime paragons and culpal lords, it would be impossible for me to open spirit hell and let you out. Even if a disaster that Arid Triad expands cosmos cannot fight against appears, it has nothing to do with spirit hell. Seniors, please be quiet. The old and aloof voice spread through the entire fourth true world, but what it received was roars that were even louder than before. However, no matter how they roared, the cultivators guarding the place did not say a single word. Even the ancient voice no longer said a single word. At the same time, the whirlwind formed by the power of the world in True Morning Tao World continued sweeping through the area. At the core of the whirlwind was the spot where the pillar of light had once reached the heavens. The cocoon that was by foam was being weakened by the wind formed by the power of the world. By the looks of it, she would only last for dozens of breaths before completely disappearing. Not too far away from the cocoon was a white light shining in the whirlwind. It was the white ring from Saint Defire. At that moment, it was slowly rising into the sky. By the looks of it, it wanted to go against the power of the world and forcefully return to Saint Defire's camp through the gap. Zhang Dao, we have to leave this accursed place as soon as possible and report everything to the three Saint Defires. Dark Dawn actually made such preparations in this accursed place? You have to help me. We definitely can't stay here. Before long, this place will attract a large number of cultivators from Arid Triad. We can't let Saint Defire's supreme treasure be snatched away. Xingji Dao roared in the white ring. His nascent divinity's eyes were bloodshot, and he was urging all his strength to control the white ring. The eyes of the black-robed old man who had already been possessed by Su Ming sparkled slightly. He nodded, then lifted his hands and sent his cultivation base into the white ring. The pressure on Xingji Dao immediately lessened. But the instant he relaxed, a great sense of danger instantly rose up, causing his expression to change drastically. Zhang Dao, what are you doing? The internet is bad. Everyone, don't be anxious. Today, there will definitely be 4 updates. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1245. Su Ming was skilled in grasping the changes in his opponent's thoughts and controlling their weaknesses. This was something he had already learned when he was hunting in Dark Mountain. Besides, 1,000-something years had passed since then. Su Ming's experiences had allowed his intelligence to grow incredibly quickly. Xingji Dao had been intimidated by the things in the world outside and wanted to leave arid triad expanse cosmos, which was why Su Ming had used it to help him. He activated the white ring together with him so that Xingji Dao would relax his guard. At the instant Xingji Dao relaxed, Su Ming sent his nascent divinity out of his body without any hesitation. Along with his soul, he charged towards Xingji Dao. He attacked so quickly that Xingji Dao was completely caught off guard. If it had been any other time, he would definitely not have done so, but his mind had been shaken by the events in the world outside and the completion of Su Xianyi's insane plan. Besides, he was also focused on escaping, which was why a weakness that should not have appeared on his body. You're not Zhangji Dao. Xingji Dao let out a low growl. His physical body was already damaged, but the vast power from his divine soul was still as strong as ever. There was a reason behind Su Ming being able to possess the black-robed old man in just a few breaths, but it was clearly not so easy for Xingji Dao. However, Su Ming still chose to possess him. Perhaps more accurately speaking, it was not a possession, but a devouring from the seed of life extermination. The instant Su Ming's soul rushed into Xingji Dao's nascent divinity, and Xingji Dao's roars echoed in the air, the white ring lost control and started spinning rapidly in the whirlwind formed by the power of the world. As it made its choice, waves of power surged into it. It could not destroy a supreme treasure like the white ring, but it could destroy Xingji Dao and Su Ming inside. It doesn't matter who you are. Without us controlling this supreme treasure, we'll all die. Damn it, are you mad? When Xingji Dao's terrified voice rang out, it was immediately drowned out by the power of the world that surged into him. When the white ring was completely swept into the whirlwind, howling sounds reverberated in the air. No one knew that the ring in the whirlwind was undergoing a crazed possession and devouring. Su Ming was no longer his previous self. Right then, he felt as if he had been reborn from the ashes. He wanted to chase after his new life, and this life required him to completely strip off his soul from the seed of life extermination. By doing so, he would be cutting off the final connection between him and Su Xianyi. At the moment the connection was severed, Su Xianyi would believe that his body and soul had been completely destroyed and that he had become the nourishment for the seed of life extermination. And to do this, Su Ming had to possess an almighty like Xingji Dao and devour his soul to replenish the life force absorbed by the seed of life extermination. That was why, even if it was incredibly difficult and dangerous, if Su Ming did not do it, he would not be able to separate the seed of life extermination. If he did not do it, he would still be unable to escape the fate of having his body and soul destroyed. Because of that, Su Ming no longer had an answer to his choice. He had to devour. He had to succeed. This was the only thought in Su Ming's mind at the instant he rushed towards Xingji Dao. The whirlwind containing the power of the world howled and covered everything in the area. Only the white cocoon not too far in the distance had been weakened layer by layer. Su Ming could vaguely see a woman hugging herself in it. As she shivered, a wave of helplessness and despair appeared on her face. The area was in ruins. Besides the whirlwind, there was nothing else. All of true Morning Dao world was in ruins as the whirlwind howled. All the cultivators in Morning Dao sect had terror on their faces at that moment. All the relocation runes connected to Morning Dao sect had been completely destroyed by the whirlwind in the world outside, turning the place into a dead end. They could not leave, and the people from the world outside could not enter either. The entire area beyond Morning Dao Sect had been filled by the violent whirlwind. All the cultivators who tried to use other methods to get out screamed shrilly in pain. Their flesh and blood were torn apart. Once they were reduced to a bloody mess, even their nascent divinities and souls were forcefully torn apart. Their bodies and souls were destroyed. This was the result of the sect masters in Morning Dao Sect choosing some disciples with their divine abilities and sending them out. This result immediately caused the expressions of the sect masters to turn dark. There were only a few cultivators left in Morning Dao Sect compared to before. There were only about a few million left. After all, most of the cultivators were in the world outside. It could be said that not many of them would survive the violent whirlwind. Because of that, the whirlwind had dealt a great blow to Morning Dao Sect's foundation. However, as long as they could get through it, then with Morning Dao Sect's foundation, there would come a day when they would recover. But the prerequisite was that no disaster that was even more dangerous would descend during the process, or else there was a high possibility that Morning Dao Sect would disappear from the long river of history in arid triad expanse cosmos, just like Ancient Way, after having existed for countless years. However, this sort of hope was just hope to Morning Dao Sect. In fact, it did not last for long before it crumbled to pieces when a shocking bang came from Su Xianyi's isolation grounds. The secret chamber where Su Xianyi was in crumbled layer by layer amidst the booming sounds. In just around 10 breaths, it shattered into pieces with a bang. As the secret chamber crumbled and the space in the area shattered, a monstrous, murderous aura that seemed to have been suppressed for tens of thousands of years rose once more and was swiftly released. Along with the appearance of the murderous aura, was a figure with a head full of long hair and dressed in a black robe. He walked out slowly from the shattered isolation grounds. His appearance immediately caused the sky and the world to turn black. As the ground trembled, countless cracks appeared. Sublime Paragon, you self-destructed your physical body in the past and turned it into a seal to seal my body. Dao Chun, you used the great soul reversal art to place your will in this place and seal me in this chamber so that I could not walk out. But now, the black figure threw his head back and let out a long string of laughter filled with a murderous aura. There was madness in that laughter, bloodlust, and a madness that made it seem as if he would destroy the universe to achieve his goal. But now, Lord Sublime Paragon, your body and soul have been destroyed. You have personally entered the physical body I prepared for you, and your seal has naturally disappeared. Dao Chun, you might have fused your will with the dimension and formed the seal in the chamber, but you did not expect that the whirlwind formed by the power of the world could turn your seal into its weakest state, allowing me, who has completely recovered, to easily break it. The black figure with the heinous, murderous aura was naturally Su Xianyi. I swore in the past that if I ever walked out of this seal, I would definitely bathe Morning Dao Sect in blood to take revenge for what you did to me in the past. A bloodthirsty smile appeared at the corners of Su Xianyi's lips. Sang stood quietly behind him and stared into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking, but he knew that Morning Dao Sect had already reached its end. When the smile on Su Xianyi's lips spread out, he moved and instantly left the world. Once he left, a shocking boom reverberated in the air, and the world immediately shattered and crumbled. At the same time, a deafening bang that caused the hearts of all the cultivators in Morning Dao Sect to tremble rang out from the 9 floating continents in Morning Dao Sect. At the instant it reverberated in the air, many of them saw a scene that they would never forget. In fact, it could be said that it was the final brilliance of their lives. They saw one of the 9 continents suddenly collapse. All the lives on it, all the mountains, all the rivers, all the buildings, all of them were instantly torn to shreds. A middle-aged man with long hair and dressed in a black robe stood at the spot where the crumbling continent had originally been. He lowered his head to look at the ground, and there was a profound look in his eyes. There seemed to be flames burning madly in that profound gaze. I once said that this expanse cosmos will be built for abyss. His voice was not loud, but the instant it traveled outwards, it caused the air to tremble, the universe to tremble, all the continents to rumble. An indescribable terror appeared in the hearts of all the cultivators as their hearts trembled. There was a smile on Su Xianyi's face. As he took a step forward, he swung his right arm, and a loud bang rose into the air. One of the continents crumbled. Over the years, I have been waiting for this day. Su Xianyi moved, and 3 loud bangs shook the sky. Only 4 continents were left of the 9 continents. Who are you? A roar filled with shock and anger came swiftly from the distance. At the same time, dozens of long arcs charged forward, and the people in the lead were naturally sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing. They stared at Su Xianyi. He looked unfamiliar, but there was also a hint of familiarity, but they could not remember just who he was. Who am I? A hint of derision appeared at the corners of Su Xianyi's lips. He suddenly threw his head back and laughed. He lifted his right hand, and without even moving, he pointed at Sect Master Ri, who had just spoken. This person's flesh and blood will be sacrificed to my people, and this person's soul will become my vessel. With it, the pupils of Sect Master Ri, who was in Death Realm, shrank. At the same time, a shrill scream of pain tumbled out of his mouth. His body instantly withered, and, at the instant he was about to die, he lifted his right hand and struck the center of his brows. With a bang, his physical body shattered, but his nascent divinity managed to escape. Sublime Paragon's power. He's a Sublime Paragon's power. At the instant a shrill scream reverberated in the air, Sect Master Ri's nascent divinity shuddered, and right before everyone's incredulous gazes, in the blink of an eye, he turned into a crimson wooden sword. With a hum, the wooden sword flashed and charged towards Su Xianyi. It surrounded him and turned into an enchanted treasure. If anyone took a closer look at the wooden sword, they would find that its presence was the exact same as the wooden sword he had wanted to give Su Ming in the past. An art of creation. This is the power of a sublime paragon. Sect Master Yu and Sect Master Xing's expressions instantly changed drastically. The faces of all the sect masters behind them instantly turned stark pale. You're a sublime paragon. There was disbelief in Sect Master Yu's voice. Sublime paragon? Take a good look and see who I am. Su Xianyi swung his arm, and his face immediately changed. His presence instantly turned into Dao Chen's. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1246. At the instant a familiar presence erupted from the sect masters of Morning Dao sect, they immediately recognized that it came from their progenitor Dao Chun. Impossible, this is impossible. Sect Master Yu shuddered. Disbelief appeared in his eyes, along with extreme grief. Su Xianyi, you're Su Xianyi. Sect Master Xing's breathing quickened. When he spoke, there was indescribable fear and despair in his voice. I remember you. You weren't a sect master in the past. Su Xianyi smiled faintly. When he looked at Sect Master Xing, he lifted his right hand and pointed at him. The world darkened. Sect Master Xing's shrill scream of pain caused all those who heard it to feel their hearts tremble. When the world lit up again, Sect Master Xing was no longer around. The mighty Almighty in Death Realm had turned into a red wooden sword that floated around Su Xianyi. Run. All Morning Dao sect disciples. Morning Dao sect no longer exists. Use everything you have to run. Sect Master Yu is the only one left among Sect Masters Ri, Yu, and Xing at that moment. As he laughed brokenly, madness appeared in his eyes, and his words were filled with grief. Once he finished speaking, he rushed towards Su Xianyi. At the instant Su Xianyi lifted his right hand, the sect master in Death Realm from Morning Dao sect chose to die a heroic death. I was born in Morning Dao sect, and even if I die, I will die in Morning Dao sect. This is my home, and even if I die, I will die defending my home. Morning Tao sect, if there's a next life, if you're still around, I still want to become a member of Morning Tao sect. As his roars reverberated in the air, Elder Yu's body started burning. His physical body was burning, his nascent divinity was burning, and his soul was also burning. A destructive power of self-destruction was swiftly released from his body. At the same time, madness appeared on the faces of the sect masters behind him. Some of them might have swiftly retreated, but most of them chose to self-destruct at the same time. If they could not live with Morning Tao sect, then they would rather die with him. The self-destruction of dozens of sect masters was a madness that shook the sky and earth, but it was bound to not erupt. If Su Ming could control time and space to reverse, then it was even more so for Su Xianyi. He lifted his right hand and waved it out in front of him. Instantly, time began to flow in reverse, and the self-detonations of the sect elders were extinguished, transforming into red wooden swords. From today onwards, Morning Tao sect will cease to exist. Su Xianyi said indifferently. He raised his hands and waved them. The dozens of red wooden swords immediately flew in all directions. Wherever they passed, the land collapsed and the bodies of the cultivators were cut in half. What was even more strange was that every time the wooden swords killed a person, a new wooden sword would immediately appear from the dead person's body. Because of that, as the wooden swords swept through the land, their numbers gradually increased. At that moment, if anyone used their divine sense to look at them, they would be able to clearly see the souls of the people from Morning Tao sect on the wooden swords. Endless pain appeared on their faces as they watched the wooden swords they had turned in to kill their fellow sect members and their close friends. In fact, some of the people who were Tao companions even had to bear the intense pain of killing their loved ones with their own hands. The person who caused all of this, Su Xianyi, only stood in midair as if he was enjoying watching the death and slaughter around him. He watched the destruction of his race and the roars filled with pain. Destroy your race and your sect. I, Su Xianyi, will make you pay several-fold for what you did to me when you descended in the fifth true world in the past. This is just the beginning. There was a smile on Su Xianyi's face. Behind him, Sang watched everything around him quietly. Conflict and hesitation appeared in his eyes. After a long while, he sighed and lowered his head. For a period of time, the entire Morning Tao sect was enveloped in a wave of crazed slaughter. Continents crumbled one by one, and soon, the 9 floating continents in the first plane were reduced to pieces and fell into Tao Ocean. The 99 continents in the second plane could not escape from this disaster. More and more red wooden swords appeared, and as they charged forward, they crumbled at the same time. It did not matter whether they were men or women, old or young, or even children. All of them died shrill deaths in the slaughter. This was the destruction of a sect. It was the complete destruction of all the existences in a sect. A few roars reverberated in the air at that moment, for long arcs charged out from Tao Ocean beneath them. Within them were the 4 spiritual beasts of Morning Tao sect: the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black turtle. The eyes of the 4 beasts were bloodshot. At the instant they rushed out, they charged towards Su Xianyi. The fastest among them was the vermilion bird. As it charged forward, Su Xianyi swung his arm, and a sea of fire immediately surrounded it. The vermilion bird was born from fire, but at that moment, it let out a shrill cry in the sea of fire and was reduced to ashes. Sword light shone, and the incoming azure dragon's head was cut off. Its nascent divinity was destroyed, and only its long body was left behind. With a bang, it fell on a shattered continent. The white tiger also fell down. Its body was not complete, but had turned into an endless amount of flesh and blood. It was as if blood had rained down on the space around it. As for the black turtle, its carapace shattered. Once Su Xianyi dug out its bloody heart through space, he squeezed it forcefully, and it turned into a medicinal core that he swallowed. The taste of the black turtle's core is pretty good, Su Xianyi said softly, as if he was savoring the taste. Nostalgia appeared in his eyes. Booming sounds surged into the sky. Once the 99 continents collapsed, the 999 continents at the bottom were destroyed as well. All the innocent lives had their right to live taken away by the disaster. Morning Dao sect had been completely destroyed. The sky was in ruins, and the ground was in ruins. Blood dyed the fog and Dao ocean red, and a bloody stench filled every inch of the land. This Morning Dao sect is the most pleasing to the eye. Su Xian finished reminiscing about the Xuanwu core. He lifted his right hand and slapped it toward the heavens. Instantly, rumbling sounds could be heard from the highest point of the tower. The sect elder's pagoda shattered into pieces. What remained was a plaque that had been crafted from precious materials, floating in the heavens far off in the distance, out of sight of the naked eye. The plate with the words Morning Dao Sect written on it had been passed down for countless years and had existed since the moment Morning Dao Sect was created. At that moment, it fell to the ground and shattered to pieces. With a smile on his face, Su Xian stared at the Morning Dao Sect that no longer existed. When he turned around, he took a step into the air. Sang followed behind him quietly. The two of them walked out of Morning Dao Sect and stepped into the rampaging whirlwind. It's over. There's just one more thing left, and it will be perfect. Su Xian stood in the whirlwind. Time and space distorted around him, as if he was affecting the whirlwind in a certain area in the world around him, causing them to disappear. The galaxy in that area would forever remain in the state of peace many years ago. Su Ming, my child, where are you? Su Xian smiled faintly. Just as he was about to close his eyes and search for him, Sang finally lifted his head and looked at Su Xianyi's back. You promised me, Sang said in a low voice. There are hundreds of words missing from this chapter. Please forgive me. This is the 4th chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1247. You promise me that even if you want to use Su Ming as a parasite, you will not harm his life. And this will also be a great serendipity for him. Not a single hint of emotion could be seen on Sang's face, but this was the first time he had spoken to Su Xian in this manner since he had started following him. It was the first time he spoke to Su Xian in this manner, and it was the first time his words did not contain the respect that came from the bottom of his heart. Instead, there was a chill in them, and Sang did not even bother to hide it. Instead, he revealed it without showing it. Su Xian turned his head around and cast Sang a deep glance. A dark look gradually appeared in his eyes. What did you say? Say again. I didn't hear you clearly, Su Xian said flatly. There was an awe-inspiring air in his voice, as if he was the calm before a storm. You promise me that you will not harm Su Ming. Sang trembled slightly. The mighty pressure from Su Xianyi's body was incredibly difficult for him to withstand, but he still gritted his teeth and enunciated each word clearly while facing Su Xianyi, saying, You have indeed shown the kindness of a senior to this child, but his family name is Su, and he is an abyss builder. Then you must be prepared to sacrifice yourself for the abyss builders. I can promise you, and I have also promised him that I will make it up to you. I will make it up to you in the end. What I need all of you to do is to believe in me, completely believe in me. Hand over your lives and fates to me. Then, one day I will fulfill my promise. I will make up for all of this. Su Xian was silent for a moment before a complicated expression appeared on his face. I have always believed in you. I have believed in you in the past, in the present, and in the future, but I only have one request. Don't harm him anymore. Let him go. You promised me. Anguish appeared on Sang's face when he spoke softly. Su Xian was silent. In the galaxy where the whirlwind howled, his silence lasted for about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. What if I don't? Su Xianyi's calm voice spread out slowly in the howling whirlwind, causing a resolute look to appear on Sang's face. If you don't keep your promise, then I cannot be certain whether I will keep my promise and help you complete the second stage of your plan. At the instant Sang said those words, Su Xian turned around swiftly. His eyes were like lightning as he stared at Sang. After a long, long time, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. "I promised you, and I will do it." As he spoke, Su Xianyi decided to no longer search for Su Ming. Instead, he lifted his right hand and formed a seal before swinging in the air. Immediately, a complicated runic symbol appeared in the galaxy filled with whirlwinds. It flashed a few times before disappearing without a trace. At the same time, in a galaxy that was incredibly far away from the place was true Morning Dao World. It was the core region that originally belonged to the Immortals Union. It was also the source of the whirlwind, the spot where Saint Defire's heaven-reaching pillar of light was once located, and the place where the endless whirlwind howled and roared. Su Ming, who was fighting against Xing Ji Dao in an invisible battle of possession, devouring, and resistance, suddenly felt as if his heart had been affected. Immediately, the half of the seed of life extermination in his soul, which was about to become complete, shuddered. Soon after, as it trembled, Su Ming's soul was swiftly sucked in by a powerful suction force. It shrank by nearly 3/10 of its original size, and the speed at which the seed of life extermination was completed instantly increased exponentially. All of this happened at the instant Su Ming suppressed Xing Ji Dao's nascent divinity with the power of possession. Nearly 3/10 of Su Ming's soul had been forcefully devoured by the seed of life extermination. Immediately, a weakness he had never felt before rose in his heart. Along with that weakness was the final bit of hope in Su Ming's heart that had been shattered, along with a deep stab of pain. In just the span of a breath, the seed of life extermination sucked in a sharp breath again, as if it had been catalyzed by someone from an endless distance away. It sucked in another 3/10 of Su Ming's soul. Because of it, most of Su Ming's soul had been devoured. The seed of life extermination shone with a strange and enchanting light. The screen of light spread through Su Ming's soul, and he could clearly see that the seed of life extermination wanted to become complete. It was growing swiftly, and by the looks of it, as long as it could absorb a little more of Su Ming's soul, it would be able to instantly make the half of the seed of life extermination reach perfection. Su Ming watched this quietly. He did not fight back, and neither did he struggle against it. To him, there was no longer any need for him to do so. It was like a dream he had when he was a child, and he was about to wake up from it, and he had completely grown up. In silence, Su Ming stared at the seed of life extermination shuddering. Immediately, the third violent suction force appeared. It instantly sucked away the 3/10 of Su Ming's soul, leaving only a sliver behind. The rest were all sucked away. Once it absorbed almost 99% of Su Ming's soul, the seed of life extermination finally became complete. The statue that looked like half a ship was filled with a vast amount of power. It also contained the will of all lives. Once it was complete, it swiftly left Su Ming's soul and flew out of his body. In a flash, it left the white ring and charged towards the whirlwind in space. Su Ming watched this scene and watched the seed of life extermination leave. It was as if his past had been taken away by the seed of life extermination. From then on, the Su Ming of the past had died, and the person who survived would be someone who preferred silence and did not want to show his face. In everyone's eyes, he would become a stranger. Su Ming's soul had not been completely sucked away. There was still a small portion left, but if Su Ming did not receive any other serendipity, then while he might not die, his life would become incredibly fragile. He would end up as a mortal, and he would become a mortal who would forget everything about his past. Instead of saying that it was a fragment of his soul, it would be more accurate to say that it was a fragment of life force. It was a life force given to Su Ming by Su Xianyi. Su Ming did not know that this life force was something his elder had obtained for him. However, to Su Ming, whether or not he had this life force was not important. Even if he did not have it, he could still rise to power. However, if he did have it, it would make his rise to power even faster. Su Ming has died. From now on, I am Mo Su. Su Ming watched the seed of life extermination leave into the distance and watched it disappear into the whirlwind. He slowly closed his eyes. He had already lost 99% of his soul. During that instant, he swiftly fused with the black-robed old man's soul, whose will had been wiped off by Su Ming, leaving behind only his soul. At the same time, the fragment of Su Ming's essence of soul was like a seed. The so-called fusion was in truth absorbing the black-robed old man's soul in a frenzy and turning it into nutrients so that the seed could grow rapidly. Time trickled by. As the black-robed old man continued absorbing the essence of soul, the black-robed old man's soul became smaller, while Su Ming's soul gradually grew larger. When the black-robed old man's soul was completely absorbed by Su Ming, his soul had recovered to nearly 6/10 of its previous peak state. This did not mean that the black-robed old man's soul was too weak. After all, in terms of level of cultivation, his soul far surpassed Su Ming's. However, a certain amount of damage had to have occurred during the devouring of the black-robed old man's soul, and Su Ming did not simply fuse with it. He was using the black-robed old man's soul to nourish it. Because of it, once he got rid of the impurities, Su Ming's soul recovered to nearly 6/10. It was as if there was a seed in the earth that was full of water. As the seed grew, it would absorb the water from the earth. When it was fully grown, if it could absorb all the water from the earth, then the earth would become a desert. The desert was also the land, but if it was used to compare the black-robed old man's soul, then it could be said that the desert was the impurities in his soul. Once Su Ming absorbed the black-robed old man's soul, he opened his eyes, and without any hesitation, he cast his gaze on Xing Ji Dao, who had been suppressed by him previously. Xing Ji Dao's resistance was still as violent as ever, but Su Ming had seized the chance and gained the upper hand. He only needed to continuously maintain that advantage and continue using his inborn ability to possess Xing Ji Dao to suppress him. Even if Su Ming was an abyss builder, he still felt incredibly mad after trying to possess Xing Ji Dao twice in a row. But at that moment, he no longer cared about it. He wanted to live, and he wanted to live well. He wanted to use another life to overturn his fate. At the same time, Su Xian formed a seal with his right hand and swung his arm in the whirlwind in the galaxy beyond Morning Dao Sect. The complicated runic symbol shone 3 times in succession before it floated in the world beyond Morning Dao Sect, still and unmoving. However, it only lasted for about a dozen breaths before a long arc with a speed that surpassed shifting swiftly closed in from the distance. There was an object shining with dark light in the long arc. It was so fast that it surpassed the detection of divine senses. It instantly appeared beside the runic symbol and fused with it. When it came to an abrupt halt, what appeared before Su Xianyi and Sang's eyes was Su Ming's seed of life extermination. The statue that was half a ship. When he saw it, a hint of pain appeared in Sang's eyes, but Su Xianyi's eyes were filled with resolve. He slowly lifted his hand and seized the air in the direction of the statue of the ship formed by the seed of life extermination. Immediately, it moved through the distortions in time around Su Xianyi and appeared in his hand. He held it. Su Ming didn't die. I fulfilled my promise to you. Su Xianyi swung his right hand and put away the seed of life extermination, then lifted his head to look at the galaxy in the distance. Let's go. It's time for us to leave true Morning Dao world. Let me bring you to the true world that belongs to me. Su Xianyi took a step into the void, and his figure instantly vanished. Sang followed silently. Before his figure vanished, he turned around and gazed into the distance with a complicated expression. But in next to no time, a wisp of decisiveness that Su Xianyi couldn't see appeared in his eyes. Recommendation votes. Everyone, don't forget your recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come a Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1248. In the Emperor of Abyss true world was the culpable lord of this true world. The Emperor of Abyss stood with his hands behind his back, as if he was waiting for someone to appear. He was very patient, as if even if he had to wait for 10,000 years, not a single change in his emotions could be detected. Time trickled by. No one knew how much time had passed, but suddenly, distortions appeared in the space in front of him. Gradually, Su Xianyi walked out. Sang followed, behind him quietly. He was not surprised to see the Emperor of Abyss in the Emperor of Abyss true world. Greetings, sublime paragon. At the instant the Emperor of Abyss saw Su Xianyi, he swung his arm and knelt down on one knee. As if he was performing a disciple's greeting, he bowed to Su Xianyi. Dao Air, there's no outsider here. You don't have to do this. Get up. A smile appeared on Su Xianyi's face. Master, the middle-aged man lifted his head. When he got up, respect appeared on his face. When he looked at Sang, a smile appeared on his face, and he nodded. Junior brother, it has been many years since we last met. You still look as elegant as ever. In the Emperor of Abyss true world, the door to Yu Xian's room was pushed open without a sound, and Su Xianyi walked in slowly. Yu Xian had her back turned to the door. She sat by the window and looked at the galaxy outside. At the instant Su Xianyi walked in, she shuddered, and a complicated look appeared on her face. Su Xianyi looked at Yu Xian quietly. After a long while, he sighed softly, then brought out an item from his bosom and placed it on the table. He said softly, "You have suffered over the years, but he is not suitable for you. From now on, you will only be immortal." Su Xianyi remained silent for a while, then sighed in his heart. He turned around and walked out of the room, gently closing the door behind him. When Su Xianyi left, Yu Xian turned her head around. Tears fell from her face as she stared at the statue of the ship formed by half of the seed of life extermination on the table in a daze. More tears fell from her eyes. Endless whirlwinds could be seen howling everywhere in the broken, true morning Dao world. The terrifying power of the world contained in the whirlwinds could tear apart numerous planets, tear apart space, and easily tear apart all cultivators' bodies. In the gigantic, true morning Dao world, countless severed limbs could be seen. They were left behind by the cultivators from the Immortals Union and Morning Dao sect after they died. But no matter which side they belonged to, they were all from true Morning Dao world. When disaster struck, they might not have been able to let go of the grudges between them. But in the storm, in the face of this catastrophe, all grudges could be ignored and forgotten. Living was the only thing that mattered. As the cultivators from the Immortals Union continued dying, they longed for reinforcements from the Immortals Union, but they could not wait, because what awaited them was the madness of the disaster. It was a nightmare where no one could help them. It was especially so for the cultivators who were far away from the core of the Immortals Union. They laughed brokenly in silence, because they saw morning star sky of the Immortals Union crumble and saw the entire region reduced to ruins. But they were also lucky, because they knew that from then on, the Immortals Union would no longer exist, which was why they chose to flee. They chose to use all sorts of methods to fight for survival in the face of the disaster. The cultivators who did not know that the galaxy belonging to the Immortals Union had been destroyed in the disaster still carried with them the hope of returning to the Immortals Union even if they fled, but they did not know that what awaited them would be terror and bewilderment when they saw the ruins. Compared to the Immortals Union, the cultivators from Morning Dao sect were even luckier. They were not lucky in terms of how many of them died, but because those who survived could always have hope, and that hope was Morning Dao sect. Since all the relocation ruins in Morning Dao sect had been shut down, they might never be able to return and would not be able to see what was going on in Morning Dao sect, but in their minds, Morning Dao sect still existed. This was hope. This hope would remain in the hearts of the living, and perhaps it would be passed down through the generations 7 days after the disaster. The whirlwind in true Morning Dao world did not disappear. Instead, it grew stronger, and no one knew how long it would last. This was something that not even the people from Saint Defire's true camp knew. As long as the power of the world surged in through the gap in Arid Triad, the endless whirlwind would exist, but it did not matter whether it was 1 year, 10 years or 100 years or 1,000 years, the power of the world would eventually disappear, and the whirlwind and true morning Tao world would also disappear. Once it disappeared, arid triad expanse cosmos would face a slaughter and a disaster that might come from Saint D fire, Dark Dawn, or even both sides. Compared to the disaster formed by the whirlwind, it would be a true disaster because it would no longer affect just one true world, but the entire arid triad expanse cosmos. Before the blood-red wind from the disaster arrived, the whirlwind filled with the power of the world filled true morning Tao world. To arid triad expanse cosmos, this period of time was the calm before the storm. They had no other choice. It was impossible for them to repair the gap torn in arid triad. They could only continuously make themselves stronger, make their sex stronger, and make their true world stronger so that they could have a sliver of hope to survive the final disaster. Then, they quietly waited for the dazzling descent of the disaster. To Saint D fire and Dark Dawn beyond arid triad expanse cosmos, the period of silence in arid triad expanse cosmos was the crucial moment for them to fight against each other. They had to fight continuously to snatch the gap. Since the gap was in Saint D fire, Dark Dawn had to pay several times the price to snatch it. Similarly, if Dark Dawn used its full strength, then Saint D fire would have to do the same. No matter what, this might be the final period of silence in arid triad expanse cosmos. It might be short or it might be long, but no matter what, it would definitely end one day. That moment might not be too far away. 7 days passed in the broken, true, morning Tao world. When the whirlwind grew stronger, a ray of white light rushed out from the pillar of light that once reached the heavens under arid triad's gap, which was the source of the whirlwind. It was so fast that it instantly rushed out of the strongest whirlwind in the core of the true morning Tao world. After he went out, only a thin layer of Baifeng's cocoon remained in a place not far from where he was. The cocoon should not have been able to last until now. In fact, it should have shattered many days ago, and everything within it had dissipated in the hurricane. The only reason Baifeng was able to maintain her current state was because, in order to survive, she had unleashed an irreversible forbidden magic of the School of Phoenixes. That magic used her longevity as a source of power, and by burning her own life force, she was able to hold on for so long. But the price she had paid was incredibly devastating for a woman. Baifeng's face could be seen in the thin cocoon. It was no longer as beautiful as it was in the past, but was now covered in wrinkles. She no longer looked as young as before. Instead, she looked as if she had just crawled out of a coffin. An old and decaying presence spread out from her body. She was still dressed in white, but she was no longer beautiful. Instead, there was a sorrowful air about her. That sorrow came from Baifeng. To her, the past 7 days had been her entire life. She could have chosen not to do this. She could have chosen to die with more dignity. If she could not live a good life, she could have chosen to die a beautiful death. But she could not accept it. She was afraid of death. She could not accept losing everything. She had always dreamed of ascending to Saint D fire expanse cosmos. And for this dream, she could give up on everything. Yet right then, deep despair filled her. She could only wait for Su Ming's arrival in the thin cocoon. She no longer had any life left for her to continue burning. Even if the cocoon could continue existing, she would not have more than a month to live. The white light that flew out of the core of the whirlwind in the distance was about to leave into the distance when it suddenly came to a halt. It changed its direction and charged towards Baifeng. In an instant, it closed in, and the white light pierced Baifeng's old eyes. If it had been 2 days ago, Baifeng would have been very excited, and if it had been 3 days ago, she would have been so excited that she would have cried. No matter what price she had to pay, as long as Su Ming could save her, she would agree to it. If it had been 4 days or even 5 days ago, Baifeng's choice would not have changed, but now it had been 7 days. She only had 1 month left to live, and she knew clearly that she could not reverse the end of her life. She stared at the white light beyond the cocoon numbly. There was not a hint of emotion on her face. There were no tears in her eyes, but when she looked at Baifeng, There were clearly soundless sobs echoing faintly in her ears. After a brief moment of silence, a soft sigh sounded out. It was as if it came from the snowstorm in the distant past. The white light outside the cocoon flashed and pierced through the cocoon. Bifone was swept up within the white light, and the white light brought her far into the distance, leaving this place. The white light was a white ring that was about 100-something feet big. It was Saint Defire's supreme treasure, but at that moment, the supreme treasure no longer belonged to a certain Saint Defire. It belonged to Mo Su, who had bid farewell to his past and been reborn. Only Su Ming knew just how difficult it was to devour Xingji Dao. He was the only one who knew the process of everything that had happened in the White Ring during the 7 days. Yet no matter what, when the White Ring flew out of the whirlwind, it meant that Su Ming had devoured Xingji Dao in his soul. At that moment, Su Ming's appearance had changed drastically. He was no longer as old as the black-robed old man, but had become much younger. He looked like a young man, and he was handsome, but there was a ghastly air to him. When his eyes shone, they contained life and stillness. He was still dressed in a black robe, but the soul in his body under it was nearly 3/10 stronger than Su Ming's previous soul. His cultivation base had also increased by leaps and bounds. The increase was even more shocking than his soul, but compared to the White Ring, all of this could not be considered a serendipity. The true serendipity was the White Ring. This supreme treasure was incredibly rare, even in Saint Defire's camp. Its value could not be described with words, but now, it had become Su Ming's. There was a wisp of presence in Avacania realm contained in the supreme treasure. If Su Ming could understand it, then the help he would receive would be so great that it would shake the sky and earth. In fact, if he kept the supreme treasure by his side, it would be the same as giving him a chance to step into Avacania realm in the future. This sort of chance was enough to make all cultivators go mad. This was the true serendipity Su Ming had obtained. Su Ming sat in the White Ring and meditated. In front of him was Bifone, who had already become an ancient old woman. She sat quietly and stared at the area beyond the ring in a daze. She had not spoken for 3 days. She was silent, and Su Ming did not have anything to say to her. In truth, saving her was just a hint of sentimentality in Su Ming's heart. He was sentimental about the past, the journey to the west, Dark Mountain, the game of going in circles, and the sigh he had experienced in the snow and wind. Seeking recommendation tickets to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1249. Su Ming was also silent. He sat cross-legged in the White Ring and stared at the galaxy outside. There was no end to it. It was filled with countless whirlwinds. When he cast his gaze over it, he could not see a single star. He could only see countless cracks in space. Occasionally, there would be some gigantic shattered stones sweeping through the whirlwinds. They were clearly once part of the planets in true Morning Dao world, but as the whirlwinds howled, most of them were destroyed, filling the true Morning Dao world with shattered stones and dust. Besides shattered stones, there were also quite a large number of shards from enchanted treasures. In fact, there was even a bloody stench surrounding true Morning Dao world. As he stared outside quietly, Su Ming had a feeling as if he had returned to the barren lands of divine essence. In fact, true Morning Dao world's current state was much better than that of the barren lands of divine essence. In silence, the White Ring charged forward. All the whirlwinds in the world outside looked as if they had been cut apart. At the instant they touched each other, they crumbled and shattered on their own. Su Ming could only use 1/100th of the ring's power to make the White Ring do this. As for making the White Ring erupt with even greater power, that was something Su Ming did not have the strength to do, even if he had the will to do it. The item was so strong that even the black-robed old man and Xingji Dao could not activate it. They could only use their own power to activate the cultivation base left behind in the treasure, which could be considered as an indirect form of control. That was why when Xingji Dao had used his full power to activate the treasure, it had been incredibly difficult for him. The pressure on him was also incredibly great, which gave Su Ming the chance to possess and devour it. Su Ming's control over the supreme treasure was different from Xingji Dao's. He did not activate the cultivation base contained in the treasure to indirectly control it, but the bald crane was controlling it. How is it? Su Ming sent a divine thought to the bald crane in his heart. Still a little lacking. Darn it, this thing is pretty hard to get. The bald crane's panting voice instantly echoed in Su Ming's mind. Are you certain that the method you mentioned will work? A barely noticeable glint shone in Su Ming's eyes, and he sent a divine thought to the bald crane in his heart. Of course it will work. Haha, don't worry. When I saw this treasure, this memory appeared in my head. It's definitely not wrong. In my memories, the mortal refinement art was once a famous treasure refinement art. This art has been lost for many years. Fortunately, I know about it. You only need to refine it according to my instructions. I wouldn't dare say that you will be able to control this treasure perfectly, but you should be able to use at least 10–20% of its true power. The bald crane's smug voice echoed in Su Ming's heart. When Su Ming had devoured Xingji Dao and wanted to control the white ring, the bald crane had suddenly sent him a divine thought and told him about the mortal refinement art. This method would allow Su Ming to use his own power to perfectly control the supreme treasure, but the process of refining it would be slightly more troublesome. The mortal refinement art enters the cycle of reincarnation as a mortal and refine it while it is in the cycle of reincarnation. Once you refine it 9 times, a hint of the will of reincarnation will be formed in the treasure. With this will of reincarnation, you can control the essence of the treasure. You don't need to have the corresponding level of cultivation to control it. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he nodded quietly. You mentioned before that this art was once famous? If it's so amazing, why was it lost? Su Ming suddenly asked in his heart. He had a vague feeling that something bad was about to happen. He had a feeling that the bald crane was not very reliable. I don't know about that. In any case, I feel that this art is very powerful. I seem to have remembered something. There seems to be some flaws in this art, but I can't remember them. Hey, are you going to use it or not? If you don't, I won't make preparations. This job is too tiring. The bald crane mumbled under its breath. Su Ming fell silent. It only lasted for the span of a few breaths, and a resolute look appeared in his eyes. Continue making preparations, he said faintly. In the blink of an eye, 7 days went by. When it arrived, Su Ming stared at the broken, true morning Tao world and the galaxy filled with whirlwinds. Finally, a planet appeared. This was the first planet Su Ming saw in the past 7 days. It was a cultivation planet that had been mostly destroyed in the whirlwinds, and only a small portion of it remained. As he stared at the broken cultivation planet, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. This is a disaster that affected the entire true morning Tao world. Since there are planets left behind, then it means that there are definitely cultivators who managed to survive the disaster by sheer luck. True morning Tao world has already been destroyed. I wonder how Morning Sect is now, and neither do I know how my senior brothers are doing. I wonder whether Death region was affected. The light in Su Ming's eyes darkened. After a moment of pensive silence, he sent a thought to the cultivation planet. Immediately, the white ring turned into a long white arc and changed its direction to charge towards the cultivation planet. Once it closed in on it, it flew straight into it. A loud bang shot up. At the instant Su Ming arrived, the cultivation planet shuddered and crumbled a little more. Countless shattered stones fell off and were swept away by the whirlwinds. It was as if the cultivation planet had already reached its limit of crumbling. Su Ming's arrival caused the pressure on it to become even greater, and the edges of the planet started crumbling. Fortunately, the crumbling did not last for long before it gradually came to a stop. When Su Ming walked out of the white ring and stepped on the ground of the cultivation planet, he saw a broken sky filled with whirlwinds. Countless layers of the ground seemed to have been swept away to reveal a crimson surface. There were no mountains in the distance, because all of them had been destroyed by the whirlwinds. There were no seas either, because they had already been flattened. Waves of heat spread out from the ground. As it intersected with the cold in the sky, violent gusts of wind swept up sand and swept through the planet. There was no presence of life in the place. In fact, the life within the cultivation planet had long since been extinguished. This was a dead planet, and it was also a world without any signs of life. Su Ming swept his gaze past the area, then lifted his right foot and stomped on the ground. Immediately, a gigantic vortex appeared with a bang on the ground with him as its center. That vortex swept up the sand and swept outwards, but it was immediately blown away by a violent gust of wind, causing the area to become clear. In just the span of a few breaths, a gigantic basin appeared under Su Ming's feet. Su Ming cast a glance at the basin, then sat down cross-legged at the bottom of the pit. When he lifted his head, he cast a glance at Bai Feng, who stood at the edge of the pit with an apathetic expression on her face. With Su Ming's level of cultivation, he could naturally tell with just one glance that Bai Feng's life had come to an end. Her presence was weak, and she was about to die. In at most a month, her life force would be extinguished and she would die. Saving Bai Feng was Su Ming's sentimentality towards the past. Bai Feng was Su Ming's ignorance towards love. Perhaps it was a joke. The bud might have already withered, but when Bai Feng died, even she herself did not know that the black-robed person beside her was Su Ming. An invisible fate connected the two of them, causing one of them to be by the other side when he was about to die. However, this love had already been blown away by the wind and turned into a sigh in the wind and snow. It did not disappear even after a long time had passed, and the person could only lament about fate and life. Su Ming closed his eyes and waited for the bald crane to finish its preparations. Then, he would use the mortal refinement art and the will of reincarnation to refine the white ring. The bald crane had been preparing all this while, but it had yet to finish. Su Ming sat quietly. Days passed, and gradually another 7 days went by. To Su Ming, these 7 days might have only been an instant. It was a short period of time for him to familiarize himself with his body, but to Bai Feng, these 7 days were nearly 3/10 of her life. She only had half a month left in her life. She only had 2 7-day periods left. Humans were complicated lives, but no matter how complicated they were, as long as they had emotions, then when they were about to die, they would be at their purest. Bai Feng stared at the sky quietly. When 7 days passed, the age on her face became even more obvious. Her presence was so weak that she looked like she had turned into a mortal. "Thank you for saving me," she mumbled. It was the first time she had spoken during the past half a month. When those words fell into Su Ming's ears, he listened to the familiar voice and stared at the woman who could still vaguely remember her past appearance, even though she was old. Su Ming gradually sighed in his heart. It was as if there would always be sighs between him and the woman in front of him in their entire lives. Perhaps that sigh belonged to him, but it might also belong to her. They had gone in circles in the past, and they had gotten to know each other because of the blood moon. Because of that, they were destined to meet in a silent, unchangeable end. I only have half a month left in my life, but I still have to thank you for allowing me to die on the ground and not in the whirlwind, Bai Feng mumbled. Anguish appeared on her face. It was not because of her life flowing away, but because she seemed to be remembering something. Gradually, a faint light shone in her eyes, as if she was immersed in her memories. In the past, I agreed to Tion's plan to ascend. For that, I could sacrifice everything. Bai Feng whispered softly while staring at the sky. What about now? Su Ming asked calmly. His voice had already changed when he possessed a new body. It was Zhang Jidao's voice, not Su Ming's. Now, the anguish on Bai Feng's face gradually disappeared, replaced by a smile. That smile made it seem as if she had seen through everything. There was an air of carefreeness about her, but there was a hint of regret in that carefreeness. It's very strange. Right now, I'm not thinking about obtaining life. and neither am I dreaming about ascending. Instead, some memories of the past keep surfacing in my head. Perhaps they're the memories of my clone, but once my clone died, they were eternally placed in a corner of my mind. But now, I think that those memories are very beautiful, Bai Feng said softly. However, her usually beautiful voice had become hoarse at that moment. It was like the hair on a beautiful woman's head turning white, and her bones gradually falling off. The update is late. I've been traveling for the entire day, and I'm currently writing the second update. It will be late, but I will update before midnight. The update time has not been stable over the past few days. Please forgive me. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1250. While Su Ming was listening to Bai Ling's murmurs in the pit on the broken planet in true Morning Tao world, there was a place that was incredibly strange even to the four great true worlds and arid triad expanse cosmos, in what had once been the Immortals' territory. That place was the homeland in Su Ming's memories. In Death Region. The entrance to In Death Region in the galaxy was a vortex that seemed to have no end. At that moment, even though there were countless hurricanes howling outside the vortex of world power that could destroy cultivators and planets, could not shake In Death Vortex at all. It could only sweep outwards but could not be pulled into the vortex at all. There were an unknown number of dimensions in Death Vortex, and there were numerous races living in them. The land of Berserkers was just one of the dimensions and one of the races. At that moment, there was a fiery red world in one of the many dimensions. The sky was red, and the ground was red. Endless seas of fire filled the world. They swept up hot wind and stirred up piercing flames, causing the world to look like the Nine Flames Hell. At this moment, on this hell-like land, there was a mountain that was surrounded by flames. It was a volcano that had not been extinguished for countless years. Within it, there was a majestic pool of flames. The pool of flames gave off a red glow, causing the interior of the volcano to be dyed dark red. There was a purple coffin floating in the lake of fire. No one knew how long it had been there, but judging by the ancient air spreading out from it, it was tens of thousands of years old. There were countless runic symbols branded on the coffin. They would shine once every 9 breaths, as if there was no end to them. They would shine for eternity, but suddenly, banging sounds came from the coffin. For the first time in countless years, the rhythm of the runic symbols flashing on the coffin changed, causing them to no longer flicker once every 9 breaths, but 8 breaths. As the banging sounds grew louder, it was as if someone was bombarding the coffin nonstop. The flickering of the runic symbols on the coffin changed rapidly. From 8 breaths, it became 7 breaths, then 6 breaths. When it reached 3 breaths, the coffin would flash, and at the instant it let out a loud rumble, the coffin suddenly let out a loud bang. In the mid of that bang, the coffin's lid rose swiftly and slowly floated in midair. At the same time, the lake of fire around it started tumbling about violently, as if there was a roar coming from within it. At that moment, an arm stretched out from the coffin. It was an emaciated arm with fingers spread out from the coffin. The instant it stretched out from the coffin, all the lava in the volcano erupted. The entire land outside roared, and the sky trembled violently. Red clouds immediately appeared above the volcano. It was as if the entire world was instantly affected the moment the arm stretched out from the coffin. Soon after, the arm that stretched out from the coffin slowly clenched its 5 fingers into a fist. Immediately, all the flames and heat in the world seemed to instantly surge towards the arm in a frenzy. All of this happened in the time it took for the arm to clench its fist. If anyone looked down from the highest point in the world, they would be able to clearly see the sea of fire in the entire world surging backwards. Wherever the flames passed, the earth would lose all heat and turn black. At the same time, all the flames, including the fire clouds in the sky, were absorbed by the volcano and gathered in the palm of the arm. When the person clenched it, a crimson pearl appeared in his palm. There was a sea of fire tumbling about inside the pearl, and fire clouds swam about. It was like a world of its own. A sigh came from the coffin. Gradually, a tall figure sat up from the coffin. When he stood up, a crimson robe appeared on his body. That robe was no ordinary robe. It was an emperor's robe. A crown appeared on the person's head, giving him the domineering air of an emperor. It was an oppressive aura that filled the entire volcano and the entire world. Failed, the person mumbled softly. There was a strange, awe-inspiring tone in his voice, as if he was looking down on the world. It was as if when he said the word failed, no one would be able to sense a hint of regret in his voice. I guessed a long time ago that the chances of success were too low. That Su Xian-yi is an ambitious and ruthless person, so how could he not have any backup plans? But my original plan was to find out exactly what Su Xian-yi was planning. An enemy that I cannot see clearly is the most terrifying, and an enemy that I can see clearly is not terrifying. This plan has always been to lure out Su Xian-yi's plan and let me know just what he wants to do. As he spoke, the man in the emperor's robe and crown slowly lifted his head to reveal his face. He was Di Tian, perhaps more accurately speaking. His appearance was the exact same as Di Tian's. However, his face was slightly more ancient, and the domineering air around him was stronger. The feeling that his level of cultivation was stronger as well. He used a fragmented soul that flew out of my body as a test. If he succeeded, it would be for the best, but if he failed, it's fine as well. It's just a mere immortal's union. It's fine even if we lose it, the man said flatly. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he lifted his head to look at the sky beyond the volcano. Gradually, a hint of a smile appeared at the corners of his lips. 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, my fellow Taoists, have you rested well? His voice traveled through the world and echoed in death vortex. After a moment, powerful ripples of power charged out from the 7 dimensions in death vortex. There were also terrifying divine senses that touched each other, as if they were communicating with each other. After a long while, those divine senses disappeared one after another and returned to their own worlds. In-death vortex also gradually calmed down. It's just as I thought. Let's let Su Xian-yi change himself outside. We don't need to go out so soon. Let him continue with his plan, and at the final moment, we'll let him know that everything he did was just a joke. Di Tian smiled faintly and slowly lay down in the coffin again. He unfurled his right palm, causing the crimson pearl to spread out, and the world was filled with a sea of fire once again. My injuries have already completely recovered 10,000 years ago. Avicania, I've already reached the borders. Give me some more time, and perhaps I will truly have the right to cross that threshold. I have to thank you for this, Su Xian. Di Tian mumbled. The lid of the coffin fell with a bang. Once it sealed the coffin, it slowly sank back into the lake of fire and disappeared without a trace. Damn the Immortals Union. Damn Morning Tao sect. Damn the universe. Damn the whirlwind. In a similarly shattered planet in true Morning Tao world was a young man dressed in black robes. He looked incredibly disheveled, but there was madness in his eyes. He lifted his arms towards the sky as if he was holding it up, then threw his head back and roared. My children, persevere. The rune is about to be set up. This damn whirlwind can't destroy us cultivators from the war chamber. As the young man roared, nearly 20,000-something cultivators behind him roared together and sent out their power to fuse with space. Gradually, a screen of light slowly appeared, as if it wanted to envelop the planet. Flame Fiend's progenitor and Zhu Yukai were among the crowd. In another true Morning Tao world was a lone ship in the whirlwind in the galaxy. It seemed to treat the whirlwind as a huge wave in the ocean and the galaxy as seawater, and it was swimming through it. O wind, O stars, you're so beautiful. O shatter, O emptiness, it's a pity there's no sunlight. Ah, why aren't you beautiful? A clear voice floated up from the ship, and when it echoed in space, there seemed to be an intoxicated air within it. Good poem, good poem. Sir, your literary talent is so great that it's rarely seen in history. This is definitely the best poem I've ever heard. Following the intoxicated voice was a woman's coquettish laughter. As the lone ship got closer, a layer of fog could be seen surrounding it. It looked thin, but it seemed to be able to restrain the whirlwind in the galaxy, causing the power of the world and the whirlwind to be unable to spread into the ship. Through the fog, it could be vaguely seen that there was a table on the lone ship. Sitting beside it was a long-haired man. He was incredibly handsome, and there was a gentle air about him that made him look like a flower. Beside him were three women who were as beautiful as flowers. They stared at the man with gentle gazes, as if even if the man said sh*t, that sh*t would definitely be poetic. Some of them were pouring wine for the man, some of them were holding fragrant fruits, and the last one was massaging his legs gently. There was a slow expression on her coquettish face. The man shook his head, as if he was thinking about his poem. However, there was a discordant sound at the end of the ship behind the four people, and it broke the poetic atmosphere. It was a snoring that sounded like thunder, and there was even a rhythmic rhythm to it. It would occasionally be loud, and at other times it would be soft. It came from an incredibly muscular man. He lay there like a fierce tiger, and in his hand was a pot of wine. At that moment, he might be dreaming, but there was saliva trickling down the corners of his mouth. No one knew what he was dreaming about, but he looked very happy. Youngest junior brother, come and drink this pot of wine. The man turned around and mumbled a few words. Then his snoring became even louder. Huh! As if he heard the man's mumbles, the flower-like man slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the galaxy in the distance, then lowered his head and sighed. Youngest junior brother, where are you? At the same time, in the ruined Morning Dao sect was one of the 999 continents in the third plane. Gradually, a figure crawled out carefully from the ruins. He looked rather wretched, but at that moment, there was a monstrous hatred on his face. Su Xian, the man trembled. His level of cultivation was very weak, but the hatred spreading out from his body at that moment was enough to crush everything. Tears fell from his eyes. He looked at his surroundings, then threw his head back and roared before flying out. He wanted to see whether there were any other survivors. Even if there was only a sliver of hope, he would not give up. I've finally finished writing before midnight. I'm sorry for making you wait for so long. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1251. That person was Deshun. Deshun was the person who gained moral character, and Shun was the person who bought his things. He was Deshun, the person who had stepped on the Lotus platform when Su Ming challenged him to be made a dynast in true Morning Dao world. His words had left the 10 million cultivators in the area dumbfounded, and even Su Ming had been stunned for a moment. This was a cultivator with outstanding talent, but he didn't have the heart to cultivate. He just wanted to run a small business. But now, the cheeky smile on his face had been replaced by intense hatred, and it was filled with a strong sense of sorrow. They're dead. They're all dead. Deshun let out a shrill roar as he charged through the ruined Morning Dao sect. He had survived not because he had great power or enchanted treasures, but because it was an accident that not even Su Xian had noticed. After all, when millions of people died, it was inevitable that there would be a few who managed to survive. With a broken-hearted smile on his face, Deshun charged through the ruins of Morning Dao sect. Suddenly, he came to an abrupt halt, then lowered his head to charge towards a floating fragment of the continent beneath him without any hesitation. The moment he descended, he formed a seal with his hands and pointed at the fragment. It let out a bang, and an endless amount of dust flew into the air, revealing a figure buried in a deep pit. It was a woman. Deshun was unfamiliar with her, but if Su Ming saw her, he would definitely recognize her. Su Hui. Blood drained from Su Hui's face. As she sat cross-legged, her eyes were shut tight. There was blood at the corners of her mouth. Her hair was no longer black, but white. There was a layer of purple light surrounding her. It was in the shape of a scorpion. In fact, there was the mark of a scorpion at the center of her brows, and it would occasionally shine. Almost at the instant Deshaun saw Su Hui, she opened her eyes. Dark light shone in them, as if there was a scorpion in her pupils. Waves of cold chill spread out from her eyes, and she instantly left the screen of light to appear in front of Deshaun, whose expression had changed drastically. He was just about to say something. Without any hesitation, with a speed so quick that Deshaun could not dodge, Su Hui seized his neck with her right hand. You. Deshaun's expression immediately changed, but a vast amount of power instantly spread out from Su Hui's right hand. Once it completely suppressed Deshaun, fear appeared in his eyes. Su Hui lifted her left hand and struck the center of Deshaun's brow. At the same time, the shadow of a scorpion shot out from Su Hui's left hand and rushed into Deshaun's body through her palm. I've planted a scorpion shadow goo poison in your body. Bring me to Su Ming, and he will help you get rid of this shadow goo poison. He will also give you a great serendipity. No one else can get rid of this goo poison. Only those who are acknowledged by me can get rid of it. If you try it recklessly, you will definitely die a violent death. Su Hui only said those 2 sentences before her body shuddered. Her eyes fell shut, and she fell unconscious. Her right hand relaxed. Deshaun's face turned pale, and he immediately took a few steps back. There was still fear on his face. The power from Su Hui's cultivation base just then had been incredibly strong to him, and it reminded him of the almighties he had faced in the past. In fact, he could clearly sense that if she wanted to kill him, she would be able to do so easily and effortlessly. Damn it, you're biting the hand that fed you. Anger appeared on Deshaun's face, but soon, as he circulated his cultivation base to check his body, his face turned paler. In the end, he even shuddered a few times. He could clearly see his veins twisting in his body. They intersected with each other to form the shape of a scorpion. Waves of cold air filled his body, causing Deshaun to suck in sharp breath. He remembered the words she had said before she fainted. A very innocent emotion spread through to Deshaun's body, causing him to feel incredibly wronged. He had clearly wanted to check whether the person was still alive out of goodwill, but he had ended up in such a state. Anyone else would feel incredibly aggrieved by this. Damn it, who is Su Ming? Where am I supposed to find him? I can't even get out of Morning Tao sect. Why will you? Deshaun was exasperated. He took a few steps forward and looked at the unconscious Su Hui. Just as he was about to lift his foot to kick her, Su Hui's eyelashes fluttered, and she opened her eyes. Deshaun shuddered. He quickly put on an obsequious smile, bowed, and retreated. But at the instant Su Hui opened her eyes, her body shrank in an incredibly bizarre manner. In just the span of a few breaths, she, who originally looked like an adult, turned into a girl who looked like she was only 6 or 7 years old. Who are you? Almost at the instant Deshaun moved back, panic appeared in Su Hui's eyes when she opened her eyes. She also moved back quickly with a terrified expression. She wrapped her arms around her shoulders, and her face was filled with wariness and terror. She looked as if she was about to cry. What is this place? Who are you? Deshaun was momentarily stunned. He stared at Su Hui in surprise, then sized her up carefully before he asked tentatively, Immortal, do you not remember me? Immortal, do you not remember me? Big brother, who are you? I don't know you. Su Hui's face was pale. She looked around in panic, and the fear in her eyes grew stronger. A thought appeared in Deshaun's head. He took a few steps back again and asked tentatively, Who is Su Ming? Su Ming? Who is Su Ming? Are you Su Ming? Confusion appeared on Su Hui's face, as if the name was rather familiar to her. However, the moment that confusion appeared, pain appeared on her face, and the mark of the scorpion shone at the center of her brows. Su Hui immediately wrapped her arms around her head, and as her body trembled, the pain on her face grew stronger. Deshaun's eyes lit up swiftly, and delight filled his heart. Looks like this diabolical woman has lost her memories. It's no wonder then. After all, I might have been lucky during the disaster, but it's impossible for others to have the same luck as me. She must have cast some sort of divine ability that allowed her to survive, but this divine ability has a great side effect. It can make her lose her memories and even turn her body into that of a child. Yup, that's what happened. That's why when she woke up for the first time, she immediately left this scorpion goo poison in my body, and she called me Big Brother. Could it be? That's right. Her memories must have gone haywire, and she looks terrified, and her body is that of a child's. Could it be that her memories have returned to when she was a child, and she hasn't stepped onto the path of cultivation? Deshun let out a fake cough. With a shifty look on his face, he took a few steps forward, and a sleazy look instantly appeared on his face. Little girl, where are your papa and mama? Deshun asked in a very natural manner. There was not a hint of him putting on an act, as if he was truly treating her as a little girl he had met by chance. Papa, Mama, I don't know. I want to go home. Suhui started crying like a child. As she cried, she moved back. Delight immediately appeared on Deshun's face. As he laughed long and hard at the sky, he leaped up and charged towards Suhui. He had already made up his mind to beat her up and force the diabolical woman to immediately remove the goo poison from her body. As for anything else, Deshun did not think of it. After all, she was in Morning Dao sect. Then while she might not be a disciple of Morning Dao sect, they were still related to each other. At that moment, Morning Dao sect had been destroyed. When he looked at her, he felt as if they were in the same boat. Why you? Don't come over here. Go away. Suhui immediately cried out loudly and quickly moved back. Extreme fear appeared on her face. Suhui, who had already turned into a child, had a pitiful look on her face at that moment, as if she had just received a great shock. But the moment she finished speaking, disbelief appeared on Deshun's face. He could only watch helplessly as he fell back, as if he was no longer in control of his own body. Go away, go away, go away. Suhui continued speaking in fear, but almost every single time she spoke, Deshun would immediately move several dozens of feet back. Gradually, great fear appeared on his face, and a vague feeling that something bad was about to happen rose in his heart. Could this be? You're a bad person. Mama said that bad people will fall when they walk. When Suhui said those words, Deshun's feet suddenly slipped, and he fell violently. His head crashed against the ground, and the fall immediately brought him intense pain, but the pain in his body could not compare to the fear in his heart. His expression changed drastically. Puppet goo. Damn it, that was a puppet goo just now. Suhui seemed to be no longer afraid, as if she was happy to see Deshun fall. She clapped her hands, smiled through her tears, and spoke again. Bad people walk with their hands. Bad people walk on their faces like turtles. Bad people lie on the ground and walk on their backs. Bad people. Grandaunt, you're my grandaunt. Please, I was wrong. I was really wrong. I'll bring you home. Deshun immediately started wailing and quickly begging for mercy. He was truly afraid that the girl in front of him would say that bad people walked with their tongues. While Deshun was being tortured by Suhui in a whirlwind that filled true Morning Dao world beyond Morning Dao sect was by phone. On the shattered planet where Su Ming was, there was a nostalgic look on Bai Feng's face. She lifted her head to look at the sky and mumbled about the past. She only had half a month left in her life, and she did not care about who was beside her. Even if she was the only one there, she would still talk about her memories. It was as if only by doing so could she not be lonely before her life was extinguished. Su Ming listened quietly until the bald crane sent a divine thought to him in his mind. It's done. Su Ming, I've already told you how to cast the mortal refinement art. Cast it here. If you're quick, you'll need about a year to go through 9 cycles of reincarnation. During this period of time, remember to spread out the light of extreme darkness. I'll protect you. Don't worry. There was a smug tone in the bald crane's words, as if it was very happy that it had managed to remember the mortal refinement art. I'm sorry, I'm late today. Please forgive me for only releasing 1 chapter today. I'll only release 1 chapter on the 25th, 26th, and 27th. But I promise you that I will release 3 chapters in a row on the 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st. I will definitely not be late, so please don't worry. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.